They can't see these monitors.
I think I did that only to the first time. Another shot. Hey, these are nice too. You should grab a few of these. Good. I'll do it. Good morning. Good morning. Let me give about a 2 to 3 minute warning for us to start. So may I ask everyone kindly to take their seat. We're ready to start with our day 2. We have plenty of seats up front. Please, from the back, if you want to take some seats in the front. Just about 1 more minute. Please take your seats. Good morning. Good morning and welcome back to day 2 of the 3rd Global and National Security Institute Tampa Summit, featuring the 9th Great Power Competition Conference. It's my great pleasure to join you again this morning for what will be surely another fantastic day for us. I think we can all agree yesterday's event was a huge success. Thank you again for our honored speakers, panelists, for sharing their expertise on such timely and critical issues. Yesterday's featured speakers included General Frank McKenzie, Executive Director of GNSI and former Commander of U.S. Central Command, Congresswoman Laura Lee, Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, Deputy Commander of U.S. Central Command, U.S. Deputy Secretary Dr. Kathleen Hicks, and the Honorable Christine Nielsen, former U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security. Our panelists examined how artificial intelligence is transforming national security, artificial intelligence in the great power competition, and the role of the AI-powered disinformation in conflict. And we can all agree what wonderful panels and panelists and energy we had in terms of audience participations. Once again, I would like to acknowledge our partners, Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office for the Department of Defense, the Institute of Artificial Intelligence at the University of South Florida, the College of Arts and Sciences, the U.S. Special Operations Command, and our strategic partner, the U.S. Central Command, for their continued support. And a special thanks to HII for their generous sponsorship. I would also like to acknowledge the Global and National Security Institute, focused on providing actionable solutions to the 21st century security challenges for decision makers at the local, state, national, and global level at the intersection or the boundary of security, policy, and technology. GNSI works closely with leaders and experts from academia, government, and the private sector in combination with the advanced scholarship and research already available at USF to create interdisciplinary solutions that look at the problems from all perspectives. As far as today's event, we'll begin with the opening remarks from Dr. Prasant Mohapatra, Provost of USF. Next, we'll hear from our keynote speaker, General Brian Fenton, Commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command. After our keynote address, we'll take a brief networking break from 9:40 to 9:50, followed by a roundtable discussion on data dominance and its impact on AI. Next, we'll begin our fourth panel discussion, which will examine small states' perspectives on AI and global security. After our morning panel, we'll break for lunch and return promptly at 1:45 to begin our afternoon breakout sessions. And the topics will include Europe, Russia, and the AI-enabled security threats, medical integration of artificial intelligence simulation in war games, and AI, what's next? Discussing the applications of AI to analyze and influence human behavior. Following our discussion, we'll take another short break and we'll return. The moderators from each breakout session will spend a few minutes summarizing their individual sessions for the rest of the audience. So let's get our conference started now with welcoming remarks from Dr. Prasant Mohapatra. Dr. Prasant Mohapatra is a provost and executive vice president of academic affairs for the University of South Florida. Before joining USF in 2023, Dr. Mohapatra was the Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of California, Davis. He was also a distinguished professor in the Department of Computer Science and served as the Dean and Vice Provost of Graduate Studies at UC Davis from 2016 to 2018. He also served as an Associate Chancellor and the Interim Vice Provost and Chief Information Officer for UC Davis. He was a department chair of computer science from 2007 to 2013 and held the Tim Butcher Family Endowed Chair Professorship during that period. He is also the recipient of an Outstanding Research Faculty Award from the College of Engineering and holds various Lab Innovation Awards, the HP Lab Innovation Awards in 2011, 2012, and 2013. Please join me in welcoming our provost, Dr. Prasant Mohapatra.
So I'm in the process of celebrating my week of first anniversary at USF. I joined USF exactly 1 year back. And yesterday I was in a meeting and they asked, what are the biggest accomplishments during the first year over here? I said, after 25 years, the football team went to a ball game. We are the verge of joining the NCAA tournament in basketball for the first time ever in the history of USF. Okay. What more do you want from a new provost? Okay, so jokes aside, good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to welcome you to the University of South Florida and for the second day of this exciting summit. I'm grateful to all the partners and organizers for continuing to provide spaces for conversation which are timely and deeply relevant in today's world. The conversation around AI in the era of strategic competition are more important than ever, as we have seen rapid proliferation of AI tools and the widespread adoption in every aspect of life, both in civilian as well as in tactical environment. These tools present both opportunities and risks. Critical thinking, ethical awareness, and human judgment are essential to use AI technologies in a more productive way. These tools can generate possibilities and augment the strength of human capital, but cannot replace it. I'm personally very interested in the advances of AI and cybersecurity issues at USF. And with my faculty hat, I have been engaged in collaborative research with the US Army Research Lab for the last 20 plus years on areas on AI and cybersecurity. So this is very close to my heart. At USF, we have focused on the responsible use and governance of this tool for our students. We want our students to be responsible, ethical leaders. We want to prepare them to navigate the societal impact and the rapid technological advances and changes that we will encounter, and they will encounter more so. So we build up the moral courage among the students in order to meet those demands in future. As we transition to today's keynote, I want to encourage you to take full advantage of the wealth of knowledge and expertise at this summit. With attendees from national security, private industry, and academia, there is so much to learn and many collaboration opportunities to explore. I hope you will take the time to engage with your fellow attendees, share your experience, and gain new insight to help you in your work. And we will also look forward to more collaborative engagement with the faculty and students at USF. Thank you for being here. I know it will be a very productive day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahapatra, for addressing us so thoughtfully this morning. Next, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome our keynote speaker for this morning, General Brian Fenton, Commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command. General Fenton currently serves as the 13th Commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command, headquartered at MacDill Air Force Base, which oversees all special operations for the U.S. Department of Defense. Prior to assuming command of U.S. SOCOM, General Fenton served as the commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. General Fenton's other general officer assignments include senior military assistant for 2 U.S. Secretaries of Defense, deputy commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command, Pacific, and deputy commanding general operations. General Fenton's key Army and Special Operations assignments include Director of Operations of the Joint Special Operations Command, Brigade, Battalion, and Squadron Command. Multiple overseas task force commands and assignments as Detachment Commander and Operations Officer in 1st Battalion and 7th Special Forces Group Airborne. Please give a warm applause and welcome General Fenton, and thank you again for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, first thing I've got to do is, I'm not really as mean as that picture might make me look. I hope. Might have just been a bad day in the organization. Dr. Farhadi, thank you very much for that introduction. Appreciate you keeping it short. We could probably go even shorter. I'll do a chat GPT version that maybe just has one sentence in it. To President Law, Rhea Law, I know she's not here, Prasant, and Frank McKenzie, the entire GNSI team, thanks for having us today. Your SOCOM team very much appreciates an opportunity to come to audiences just like this and have these type of discussions and these type of conversations. So we're really grateful that we were invited. At U.S. Special Operations Command, or SOCOM for short, we talk a lot about our Tampa family, or La Familia, as we like to refer to it. And you all here, and many others that may be listening right now, are part of that. And it's great to be on this campus and among these ranks, and certainly after a great basketball win last night, that I echo Provost that we're this close getting into the NCAA, and we're really excited as well over at SOCOM. So you probably heard a big cheer coming from McDill. And this community has fostered a great teammateship, as we like to think about it here, in the greater Tampa, St. Pete, and Clearwater area, or otherwise known as Champa Bay. That's welcomed military members, past and present, and their families so very warmly. So we're really grateful to continue to be part of an incredible community. And we've also enjoyed a great partnership with USF, cooperating on research in areas critical to our SOCOM team and to national security. And venues like this conference, especially focused on strategic competition, are extremely important. Academia, government, and industry all coming together in a way that we might call an idea factory for good, fueled by multidisciplinary approaches to problem solving, focused on tangible outcomes, and many others that would end up being end states we should all achieve and endeavor to aspire to. So with all that at top of mind, I'd like all of us again to give a round of applause to the GNSI team and USF for this great conference and this very, very important work. So if I could get a round of applause for that. Now, a mentor of mine, and a few of you here might have heard of him, a guy named Lou Holtz. And if there are Notre Dame fans in the audience, don't be embarrassed. You can raise your hand. Used to say, upon giving remarks in an audience just like this, he'd say 10% of you won't remember 10% of what I said 10 minutes after I said it. Nonetheless, for the next 90 minutes, I'm just kidding. I thought Frank's ready to fall out of his seat there. Everybody had a breath. In fact, that wasn't my idea about the 90 minutes. It was ChatGPT's. It was actually the AI that recommended 90 minutes so I could cover this topic adequately. However, you're in luck, because at SOCOM, we've long held a motto that says humans are more important than hardware. And lately we've been able to add and software and ChatGPT and Perplexity and Dolly. So we always keep a human in the loop to override those kind of recommendations. So this morning I'll override that recommendation and try to do three things in short order. First, tell you a bit about who we are and what we do, because many of you may know SOCOM, but there may be a few out here that are less familiar with your special operations forces. Next, we'll share a little about what we're seeing in terms of the challenges that I am absolutely positive and sure about were discussed yesterday. And then lastly, we'll end with how we're transforming at Special Operations Command to meet those challenges. So first, a little bit about what we do. Your SOCOM team is headquartered just down the road in South Tampa at MacDill Air Force Base. And our command's over 70,000 personnel strong, responsible for every special operations in our U.S. military. It's a joint force made up of uniformed and incredible civilian teammates. And that includes our Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, Marine Raiders, Air Commandos, and Space Guardians as of very recently, as well as our team of experts on intelligence, communications, logistics, data, psychological operations, human resources, and many, many more. And your special operations team operates in all domains. I like to say it's from seabed to space and cyber to fiber and everything in between. And we're across the globe in over 80 countries every single day across 24 time zones with 6,000 of our men and women, uniformed and civilians, deployed overseas as we speak this very morning. And we're doing some of the nation's most sensitive missions: crisis response, counterterrorism, and great power or strategic competition. And fundamental to us achieving success in those missions is our work with teammates just like are seated in front of us today and probably out on video conference. Work with industry, academia, allies, and international partners, and many more. And since we have some industry folks in the audience today, I thought I would just talk a little bit about what the SOCOM product is. And I'd say the SOCOM product for this nation is successful national security outcomes in the most politically sensitive and challenging environments, and winning each and every time. And continuing with that analogy, I'd tell you that we have 3 business lines to get that product into the right place and do it successfully. First is great power or strategic competition. That's essentially pushing back and competing with the People's Republic of China and against Russia's coercive activities and aggression. And we do this alongside and with generational relationships with international and U.S. government partners and allies. The second business line is counterterrorism, one SOCOM's known far and wide for, and continuing to assure that violent extremist organizations don't metastasize or present a threat to our homeland, our allies, and partners. And that includes organizations like ISIS, or Al-Qaeda, or Al-Shabaab. And our third business line is responding to crisis, worldwide, no notice, executing a sacred obligation to rescue U.S. citizens who may be hostages or recover our diplomats who may be under duress anywhere in the world. Using these 3 lines and against that very desired national security outcome, we work every day to prevent great power conflict and to prepare the environment in the event of a conflict of someone else's making so that our joint force can prevail if called upon. And on top of that, and all the while, we also work through our crisis response and counterterrorism lens to preserve strategic focus for this nation against the national defense priorities as set out for us by the Secretary of Defense. So the takeaway is that your special operations team provide options, creative, tailorable, irregular, and asymmetric for our senior leaders, while at the same time creating dilemmas and challenges for any adversary or competitor that wishes to oppose us. So now I'd like to tell you briefly about what we're seeing in our teammates deployed around the world. So at this moment, very apparent to everyone here, the rules-based international order that's been in place since World War II faces significant challenges, from Russia to the PRC, from Hamas to the Houthis, from Iran to North Korea, and many more. And our rivals and foes seek to divide and weaken the United States and allies and partners. In fact, we're facing what we refer to as waves of consequential challenges. And these waves remind me of something that not only I, but I'm sure you have seen in nature. Waves of consequence, as they're called. They're usually arrive in many places across the world in the wintertime. And I know in Tampa, we have 2 seasons. We've got summer and hot summer. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the winter, so go with me on this one. So in the winter, as many of you know, powerful winds sweep across the ocean, and they surge the water columns with such endurance, with such energy that they produce waves of enormous proportion. Waves seen only in places like South Pacific or Hawaii or Portugal. And they're massive, they're intense, and they're thundering. So much so that they're called by folks that dare to ride them waves of consequence because of the power and the speed and what they can deliver in terms of good or bad outcomes. And those waves, and I'm familiar with those from 6+ years in Hawaii, remind me of the challenges we see right now to the rules-based order. Waves such as what we're seeing with the People's Republic of China, asserting its military power in the Indo-Pacific, while it coerces other nations around the world through economic and diplomatic pressures, the like of which we've seen as intellectual property theft, bribes, predatory investment strategies, and their own use of private security companies that we like to call private spurious companies, because they mean no good to anyone except the PRC. And then there's Russia's brazen, unprovoked, and illegal invasion of Ukraine, now in its third year, creating the largest land war in Europe since World War II, with thousands of innocent men, women, and children affected. Carnage our world hasn't seen in decades and thought we would never see again. And outside of Europe, we've seen Russia's private military companies, or as we like to say, private malicious companies, doing the same ill will and untoward things in other nations outside of Europe, all for the Russian Federation, engaged across Africa and elsewhere to meddle in weak and unstable nations, extracting resources and generating instability. And both of these waves carry global information operations that create misinformation, untruths, and unrest. And then there's another wave, state actors like Iran, continuing to destabilize their regions. In fact, Iranian-sponsored Houthis continue to disrupt shipping lanes, causing lasting implications for the global economy, providing weapons and in some instances guidance on how to operate against the U.S. and partners and allies in the gray zone. And then there's some smaller but consistent waves remaining ever present, and they can be seen as violent extremist organizations. And while the physical caliphate, the land domain, sought by groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, is contained today in a way that we're not complacent about and remain vigilant on, their ideology, extremist ideology, is still unconstrained as it runs over the internet. And just when you think that's enough, there's one more wave, very appropriate for the conference today. It's a wave of tech, smaller, faster, cheaper, more kinetic, more lethal. That's changing the character of warfare. And we're seeing it in the democratization of uncrewed systems and robotics in the air, the sea, undersea, and on the ground. Ubiquitous surveillance tools like biometrics and cameras and sensors of every kind in cities and in places that used to be for monitoring and repressing citizens of autocratic regimes is now spread to the Western world. And of course, there's artificial intelligence, and it enables all the above, and it's game-changing. And our foes are leveraging artificial intelligence, AI, in various ways. We've watched the PRC use AI to augment cyber attacks, support economic espionage, and assist in the development of what they call system destruction warfare, where their goal is to destroy weak points in ours and partner and ally systems across domains with targets such as network connections and satellites and logistical supply systems. And then the Russian military and the Russian Federation are also using large language models and those tools to conduct reconnaissance of satellite capabilities to support their operations in a cyber and space domain. And we've also seen North Korea and Iran use AI to assist in their cyber attacks and cryptocurrency theft. And none of these applications cares about an ethical approach or anything rooted in democratic values, because they don't have to and they don't want to, but we do. All of this, and probably waves I didn't even discuss, can be very unsettling. But just like out in the ocean, every once in a while there's a rare breed that braves these mammoth waves, and not only braves them, but looks at them as opportunities to be mastered, and uses these challenges in a very unique way. These individuals or these groups possess the courage, the mindset, the creativity, the tenacity, and the skill to ride these immense mountains of water, or challenges as we see in the rules-based order today. And daring to ride them means seeing these challenges, much like the big wave riders that do it out in the ocean, as opportunities to be mastered and conquered. Opportunities that call for partners of consequence to go against the waves of consequence. And that's just what I see seated here today, and I'm sure out on video conference. Partners like academia, government, and industry, all here to talk through the challenges of great power or strategic competition and all that that entails in the tech space, and to tackle them along with your SOCOM team. These partnerships of consequence to address the changing character of war are required to master and challenge these waves presented by adversaries and competitors that each and every day look to compete and present us with dilemmas or challenges of our own. And these partnerships give us an opportunity to alter the tactics and reshape the landscape, either of conflict or in competition or crisis, to our advantage to team democracy. But it can't be done without partnering with academia, industry, and international teammates, to name but a few. In fact, you'll see your SOCOM team in sessions just like this, preparing to master or ride those waves of consequence with our partners. And every year in May here in Tampa, we run a conference we call Special Operations Week, or SOF Week. It's gone on for years. Many of you know it. Many of you may have taken part. And this year, the theme for that is Global Problems Deserve a Global SOF Network. Hard problems in hard places. And it's our opportunity to reinforce that partnerships just like this, the ones that you've built and the ones that you're a part of, are important to master the challenges as I've just laid out. And tech and how we are transforming will be a key part of that SOF Week. So this brings me to my final point. At SOCOM, we don't just embrace these changes or these challenges. We ride them. We think we drive them. We think we're pathfinders and trailblazers as part of the Department of Defense for them. Because from our earliest of days in developing satellite communications for man-packed portable application for our special operators on the ground, to the modern day application of artificial intelligence, your special operations senses operational problems and looks to develop solutions along with partnerships just like this. And many of those solutions then spread into the rest of our joint force to assist our teammates in their missions across the continuum of competition, crisis, and conflict. And we know that technology, like many things, evolves, and that change is inevitable. And what triumphs today may falter tomorrow. And what keeps us winning may not be the same recipe as we need for tomorrow. But for us, we all resonate at the SOCOM team with one thing. Our competitive and comparative advantage is our people. They are what make us unique because they're naturally discerning. They're critical thinkers. They're especially recruited, assessed, selected, and trained to be proactive problem solvers. And when we talk about our people, we always end with our comparative and competitive advantage because we will wrap everything else around them in order for them to take us to the success I laid out as our product for the nation. So when we talk about transforming, we actually start with our people. And then we add tech, and then we add organizations. And tomorrow, I know people will be on your mind as you have a panel focused on the workforce of the future, a very important and key part of where we will all go in the challenges I described. And that's hits at the heart of the SOCOM team, because if we have one more dollar to spend in Special Operations Command, we'll spend it on our people. Because transforming for the future, in our estimation, starts with investing in our people, in education, in workforce development, and at some point in utilizing the technology that we all so much crave. Having a skilled, innovative, and creative workforce, specifically building digital fluency and technologists as well. And in terms of tech and AI, that will really be important for your special operations team. Because we are data rich. We don't have data lakes. We have data oceans, from terabytes to petabytes to exabytes to zettabytes. We want to crush that data for decision and position advantage. to deliver the successful product time and time again. We also want to do it to reduce cognitive load on the analyst and the warfighter, while increasing the speed and precision to give an advantage to our tactical commanders. And your SOCOM team is, in essence, riding this wave by using data and artificial intelligence right now to produce dilemmas for our adversaries in competition, in crisis, and if it comes, in conflict. Seeing and sensing targets at a more precise level, and enabling our joint force to see, sense, and strike anywhere in the globe, as the Secretary of Defense reminds us about. And we're capitalizing on digital intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, because we know that there are mammoth mountains of publicly available and open source data that we're all tapping into today. And then using all of that as a data-centric approach to how we address the potential for conflict. And you'll see the SOCOM team pioneering new tools and capabilities, such as generative AI and autonomous and remotely crewed systems. Looking at affordable mass, one person and the many of manys in these uncrewed systems, and researching into applications as far and wide as nano and biotech. All of that to give us an advantage against any adversary or competitor. At the same time, we're also developing our talent and our data access and our architectures to take full advantage and leverage both the oceans and the mountains of data as I just described. So that may be far from the movies about Special Operations Command that you're familiar with, and that's okay. That's a part of what we do at the SOCOM headquarters that really is the business end of managing this entire incredible enterprise. And we're committed to it. But we're also committed to developing AI and autonomy in a responsible way, in an ethical way, to ensure it's trusted and reliable and in accordance with our Department of Defense policies. The last part of how we're transforming is how we're organized. We are willing to shapeshift and change who we are in order to address and be successful at our nation's problems. I imagine that's much akin to the industry, because if you're not willing to do that, at some day you may not exist. You may not be relevant, and we certainly don't want that to be the case for Special Operations Command. So transforming in terms of people, technology, and organization is absolutely at the heart of what Special Operations Command is doing. In all of these, we see potential impact of the waves that we have, as I described in the challenges, from our team rooms to our boardrooms. It's making us a different organization than we were a few short years ago. So I'll wrap up with this. I know Deputy Secretary Hicks asked you to consider how your expertise, how this audience and those you represent can help make a difference. So along those lines, I'll just ask one thing of everybody here. If you're in academia, talk to somebody like me. If you're in government, talk to somebody in industry. And if you're in industry, well, just talk to everybody, because we need those synapses and those connective tissues to occur. Talk about what you're doing, what you're seeing, what you're up to, because it might just create that partnership and a winning solution against those waves of consequence. Waves of consequence, as I said earlier, that require partnerships of consequence, just like this. And I might add that probably start at conferences of consequence, like the one we're in today. So thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, share some thoughts with you. I certainly look forward to seeing the results of this conference and any notes that can help your Special Operations Command team. I look forward to seeing all at Special Operations Week if you can come back to Tampa, and have a great conference.
Well, I'm completely speechless after that speech. I don't know what to say. General Fenton, thank you so much for that truly enlightening speech. And if you allow me, I will carry forward the theme of our Tampa Bay family coming together for good to do that. So thank you so much. We'll take now a short break, and please return to your seats by 9:50 sharp to begin our next roundtable discussion on data dominance and its impact on AI. Just like music.
Yeah? Huh? No, that's the right time.
Can I ask everyone, please take your seats for our next roundtable? And again, plenty of seats up front, folks. I'm going to give it just one more minute for people from the coffee to work their way to their seats. Okay, so welcome back. We're ready to get started with our roundtable discussion on data dominance and its impact on AI. Just a quick point from folks that joined us today. The note cards you see on your chairs is for us to answer or to write down your questions, and after at the appropriate time, and one of us will come and pick up those cards and hand it over to the moderator. So the cards you see on your chairs, that's what those are for. And also, after this session, we'll not take a break, but just a quick a little timing for us to reset the table for the next panel for setup time. So we're pleased to have today with us today moderator Dr. David Oakley, Academic Director for the Global and National Security Institute of USF. Dr. Oakley began his role as an academic director for the GNSI in 2023, where he oversees the GNSI's academic programs and activities, including the establishment of a master's program and a fellowship program that I spoke about yesterday. In his role, he also interfaces with a broader academic research network across the USF system, as well as key partners in US CENTCOM, US SOCOM, the military services, and other academic and government partners. And beautifully said, he interacts with our Tampa Bay family. Dr. Oakley has served in the U.S. Army as a field artillery officer and strategist in the Central Intelligence Agency's National Clandestine Service Directorate of Operations as a staff operations officer and at the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center. He also serves as a visiting fellow with the King's Center for the Study of Intelligence at King's College London, is on the editorial boards for Intelligence and National Security, Interpopulum, Journal of Irregular Warfare and Special Operations, and JSOW Press. I will turn the discussion over now to my friend and colleague, Dr. Oakley, who will facilitate the discussion and the Q&A. Please, Dave.
Thank you, Adib. It's great to be here. I'm very excited to be the moderator of this panel. Looking forward to the discussion to show us the good and the bad of data dominance. Very privileged to be the part of the panel. The GNSI really grabbed three great panelists drawn from the executive branch, legislative branch, and academia. The only thing they skipped on is the moderator, but the panelists are fantastic. And so let me turn to the panelists now and introduce them. To my right is Alexandra Seymour. She is the staff director for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection Subcommittee under the House Homeland Security Committee. Prior to her work on the committee, she served as a professional staff member on the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. To her right is Mr. John Turner. He's the acting deputy chief digital and artificial intelligence officer for policy at DoD's Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office. Can you get that on a business card? Okay. Mr. Turner joined CDAO from the former office of the DoD Chief Data Office, where he helped build a network of CDOs and data leaders across 46 major DoD components. Finally, to Mr. Turner's right is Dr. Roberto Gonzalez. Dr. Gonzalez is a cultural anthropologist whose work focuses upon science, technology, society, militarization and culture, processes of social and cultural control, and ethics and social science. His latest book, which I recommend, is Virtually War, The Quest to Automate Conflict, Militarize Data, and Predict the Future, which was published by the University of California Press in April 2022. So thank you very much for being part of this. We'll go ahead and jump right in. You know, what we're looking for in this panel is more of a discussion and a dialogue to grapple with the issues of data dominance and the impact on AI. Once you take it from the perspective of not just competition and what we need to do to achieve data dominance, but some of the trade-offs of data dominance. So I'm a true believer that in any choice you make, there's consequences to this choice and there's advantage. So if we can really explore that. To begin the conversation, I'd like to turn to you, John. Your office, and I'll read from the website, is responsible for the acceleration of the DoD's adoption of data analytics and AI to generate advantage across from the boardroom to the battlefield. Considering the leading role CDAO has in DoD's adoption of data, how do you interpret the phrase data dominance? And how is your organization working to achieve data dominance? And finally, what are the implications for achieving or not achieving data dominance?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, David. So thanks very much again for everyone being here, and especially for this opportunity to talk about data as it pertains to AI. I think it goes without saying, and everyone clearly recognizes that you don't have artificial intelligence and machine learning without quality data. And so having a focused conversation on data and how we approach that, how we think about that in the national security context is wholly appropriate. To the term data dominance, I'll confess it's not my favorite. I think I understand the sentiment, right? That we do need to move with a sense of urgency, that the national security imperatives that are being discussed throughout this conference require that we have a strong focus on building a foundation of quality data. But I would offer that the more we as practitioners, as data leaders within the government, as providers within industry, as thought leaders within academia, the more we use as precise a terminology as we can muster, the more we will help manage that potential expectation gap. Right, and that expectation gap between what our leaders and our resource sponsors see in the private sector, and then what they expect to be delivered in terms of national security, there's a big gap that everyone recognizes, and the way that we help clarify where we are versus where we need to be and where we're going, and do that in a way that has precise language, I think it's to all of our benefits. The terminology that you mentioned, right, in our mission statement, and certainly General Fenton mentioned decision advantage. Right, this is the outcome. This is what we are using data analytics and artificial intelligence to achieve. Right, is smarter decisions. You heard General Fenton say from the team room to the boardroom. Right, that's very much akin to our recognition that the promise of data analytics and AI is not just for weapon systems or in an operational context, but it's also for the Department of Defense to manage this very large organization and the business of the department in an efficient and effective way. And so, as we think about the importance of data and building a foundation of quality data, I would first be remiss if I didn't mention that the Department of Defense recently released, Deputy Secretary Hicks signed out in November, the 2023 Data Analytics and AI Adoption Strategy. And part of that strategy from Dr. Martell, which you'll hear from in this conference, starts with a hierarchy of needs. And this hierarchy of needs says that at the foundation of the hierarchy, you really have a layer of quality data. And it's upon that hierarchy, upon that foundation of quality data that you can then build insightful analytics and metrics. And then on top of that, right, that is when you have the opportunity to employ machine learning and statistics at scale and bring those AI and ML capabilities to bear. But if you don't logically start with a foundation of quality data in terms of your people, your process, your organization, your technology, then you'll be out of sync as you try to apply the rest. And so, very, very fitting here that we're talking about the importance of data management. As it pertains to competition, right, and how we think about data in the role of competition, I would offer that we've heard and discussed a lot about how we framed the AI competition with the PRC in this conference, and you've heard from many, and there is, I think, a general discourse on this topic that really anchors on AI innovation. Right, and it anchors on the core inputs to AI innovation. So as we talk about this issue, we often start with data, algorithms, talent, and compute, right? Kind of the four main building blocks to how we think about AI innovation and our ability to build and harness this emerging technology. And that discussion around how the U.S. and how the PRC are advancing in terms of data, talent, algorithms, and compute from a national level and from an economic level, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a good dialogue to have. What we would offer within the Department of Defense, however, is that in a military context, as we're talking about how this technology is going to help us prevail across the competition continuum in crisis and help us prevail in conflict if necessary, is using this general purpose technology as an input to real mission outcomes. And so it's really important that we think about AI not as a thing that is delivered, but rather as a general purpose technology that enables our systems and our capabilities to operate more effectively. So rather than talking about data, we should be talking about data availability. Do we get the right data to the right people when and where they need it? Rather than talking about talent and trying to measure how many PhD AI engineers are coming out of our universities, we need to be thinking about our workflow integration and our workflow adaptability. How much are our practitioners able to use and understand and incorporate, adapt their old processes to take advantage of new technology? Rather than just thinking about the performance of an algorithm, we need to be thinking about the trustworthiness that we can provide to those decision makers, how they can have justified confidence in the results and the predictions from these models such that they can make sound decisions. Rather than just thinking about our compute and the capacity and the number of GPUs in any given location, we need to be thinking about the systems integration and how compute is integrated within our platforms and systems so that the compute is available when and where it's needed. And so that requires a little bit more of a rigorous analysis, one that then helps us understand the promise of AI and our comparative advantage in the context of a specific mission, in the context of an operation in a specific environment. And that's really, I think, where for the Department of Defense, where the focus of our thinking about AI competition, that's how it should be oriented. Perhaps I'm offering an additional layer beyond sort of the standard national discussion around data, talent, algorithms, and compute. Let me maybe finish with a third thought here, David, and this speaks to how we are driving the adoption of data analytics and AI in order to improve the capabilities of the Department of Defense, again, from the boardroom to the battlefield. And our approach, as outlined in the strategy, really speaks to, I think, what you've heard from a number of panels across the conference yesterday, in particular from Sky Moore and General Shanahan yesterday, which is really the emphasis and the priority on an experimentation-driven approach. So through experimentation, where we are working with data practitioners, technologists, and warfighters and mission users side by side, using real data on live networks and having leave-behind capability so that we iterate and integrate, that is the recipe by which we're continuing to mature this. Not stepping back, going into the back room and developing architecture and then bringing those requirements to be delivered in a number of years once the resourcing has been secured, but rather working with what we have to iteratively push forward. And so thinking about that experimentation-driven approach across the whole hierarchy of needs, from data, analytics, AI, and the enablers of experimentation and prototyping, talent management, acquisition reform, a lot of these core enablers that we have to focus on too, having that iterative and persistent approach of relentless incrementalism, I think, is what we really need to focus on. So within the Office of the Secretary of Defense, how we're looking to drive that is really through both investments to help the department move at speed and at scale. At speed in terms of delivering specific capabilities for end users in the Pentagon as well as in the combatant commands, but also helping the department move at scale. So thinking about enabling digital infrastructure that helps PEOs and programs, helps builders leverage enterprise resources to help them go faster in a more coherent way. So that's, I think, probably a little bit about the importance of data and how we go about thinking about the competition, as well as advancing our foundation of data to employ AI.
Hey, thank you, John. With that, I'd like to turn to Roberto. In your book, you capture, basically what sums up a garbage in, garbage out. And some of you are concerned with the reliability of data, and then also the users of data, understanding and being able to judge that data.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me here, Dave, and for the panelists too for being here. Before I get to that, I just want to start because I am a cultural anthropologist, and as best I can tell, I'm the only one at this entire summit. And some of you may not even know what cultural anthropologists do. So what's the main part of my job description is observation. And there's this great T-shirt that says, anthropologist goes to zoo, watches people. Right, so that kind of sums it up in a nutshell. So I do want to start just with an observation before I dig into data. Yesterday's keynotes, panels, and fireside chat are, I think, good illustrations of a fundamental premise shared by many of the leaders in the Defense Department, but also in the tech industry. And it's the idea that the US and China are locked in an AI arms race or competition over data. That will determine the future of global geopolitics and the global economy. This assumption has, I call it really a grand narrative, and it's helped reinforce ties between Silicon Valley firms, which is where I happen to work in the heart of Silicon Valley, and U.S. defense and intelligence agencies. Many current and former tech executives, from Eric Schmidt, who we'll hear from tomorrow, down the line to Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Palmer Luckey, and others, have also really kind of latched onto this narrative, as have many startup executives and folks from venture capital firms as well. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment and start by asking, does the grand narrative hold water? And I'm going to take the position that it might not for several reasons. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to stick with two. First, there's compelling evidence that many analysts are overestimating China's current AI capabilities and even its military capabilities. While it's true that China's technologies have improved greatly over the past decade, it's also important to avoid exaggerating the improvements by claiming that they're an imminent threat to U.S. national security. Here, I agree with a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General who last year said, and I'm quoting here, "It feels at times like we are dangerously close to making the same kind of erroneous bomber missile gap assessment with AI that we did with the Soviet Union in the early 1960s. What's even more concerning is that as all of this is happening, Chinese military analysts and researchers have tended to overestimate America's AI capabilities too. Flawed assessments on both sides run the risk of making the AI arms race a self-fulfilling prophecy. A side note, while Chinese leaders might boast about the country's military-civilian fusion initiative, China faces serious internal problems of its own, as many of you surely know. An economy that's been decelerating for 20 years now, a demographic decline that will likely cut the population in half by the end of this century, down to about 700 million people, and a brain drain that is siphoning some of the most talented researchers from that country to Western nations, especially Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Germany, and other EU countries. Interestingly, the US is not really one of the prime destinations anymore for reasons we can discuss later on. We also need to remember that China's military hasn't fought a war since 1979, and that didn't go so well for them either. It's unlikely that China's leaders would be reckless enough to invade Taiwan. And as that country's outgoing president, Tsai Ing-wen, said last November, it simply isn't in China's interest for the foreseeable future. A second problem with the notion of a race for data dominance, or AI, has to do with the potential strategic consequences of a tech-heavy defense agenda geared towards preparing for future wars enabled by AI weapon, surveillance, and logistics systems. Banking on high-tech great power conflicts may have the unintended effect of leaving the U.S. somewhat less prepared for longer conflicts in which Western powers struggle vainly against insurgents who will fight back, rigging the rules of the game in their own favor with low-tech but effective tactics. For example, digging tunnels to escape observation, using vehicular decoys to deceive surveillance cameras, and switching cell phone SIM cards to evade GPS tracking. In the words of an anthropological colleague, Hugh Gusterson, ironically, the long-term advantage may go to the low tech. Also, let's not forget that technological superiority didn't lead to US victories in Vietnam or in Iraq or in Afghanistan. Advanced technology cannot overcome a determined adversary engaged in irregular warfare on its own turf. Why then has the grand narrative of an AI race and the competition for data dominance taken hold? Why have so many experts in both the public and private sector latched onto it? From the outside, it looks like the narrative plays an essential role in boosting the military's demand for AI products, serving to justify and accelerate US defense spending in the tech sector. When Amazon is awarded a $10 billion cloud computing contract from the NSA, or when Microsoft lands a $22 billion VR headset contract with the Army, it's understandable why tech executives repeat the grand narrative. It's in their interest to do so and in the interest of their shareholders. That said, we should recognize that today, the nature of the military-industrial complex has changed. The Defense Department has come to rely more on business leaders than business leaders on the Defense Department. Among other things, the unwarranted influence that Eisenhower warned us about has helped the tech industry avoid meaningful regulation over data privacy and AI, in stark contrast to our EU allies. Instead, we allow the industry to more or less regulate itself. Let's consider how the practices of Silicon Valley companies are influencing military spending. For decades, venture capital funding structures have encouraged high-risk startups to prioritize rapid growth, find profitable business models, deploy aggressive marketing campaigns, and launch accelerated hype cycles as corporate leaders make extraordinary, but often unverifiable, claims about their products. While such activities may be acceptable in the world of consumer goods, there's much more at stake when Silicon Valley's startup model is applied to military products, especially weapon and surveillance systems. We should be less worried about killer robots or autonomous weapons making their own decisions than the prospect of fielding shoddy machines or programs that result in innocent people and American troops dying. Soldiers' lack of trust in new technologies, which is something I write about in my book, is a rational response to high-risk situations. If the pace of developing and adopting AI-enabled weapon and surveillance systems continues to accelerate, the end result is likely to be an expensive, high-tech arsenal consisting of flawed, unreliable, and dangerous technologies that don't work as advertised. I was glad to hear several panelists yesterday talk about the importance of testing and evaluation, but I am concerned about the intense momentum and pressure to field AI-enabled systems when there are still so many limitations and risks. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention how this summit, despite good intentions and a few critical voices, might potentially reinforce the grand narrative I talked about at the beginning. For an anthropologist like me, it's important to understand not only the form, but the functions of gatherings like this one. Not only the content of the ritual acts and the ritual meals, but the consequences. It's tempting to be swept along by the optimistic rhetoric and hype surrounding AI, and I hear it all the time in Silicon Valley. However, unwarranted influence in 2024 works much as it did in Eisenhower's day. In a recent report, the New York Times identified more than 50 former DoD and national security officials who took jobs with venture capital firms after leaving government, and the newspaper called it, quote, a new spin on the old revolving door. Let me end by respectfully proposing that we think of ourselves not only as Americans, but as global citizens, as one of our panelists mentioned yesterday, in an emergent multipolar world that presents new opportunities. Doing so would require us to rethink ideas of dominance, whether data dominance or military dominance, on the world stage. It would also allow us to move past zero-sum thinking and focus more on common threats facing us all. Things like climate change, epidemic disease, resource depletion, and the instabilities of global capitalism. Using data and AI to help solve those problems might contribute to true global security. And just a closing note here, in my book, one of the things I do talk about, to get back to the issue of data, that's often not understood, is that data literally comes from a Latin term that means gift. Datum is the term for that, and it's still reflected in some of the Romance languages today. I think that's a really important starting point for understanding the complexities of data. I mean, if you do a literal translation, what this panel should be about is gift dominance, right? Which kind of blows your mind. But anyway, that's how I'll start there.
Hey, thank you, Roberta. Alexandra, you've heard about some of the ways DoD is working to enable the use of data. You've heard of some of the concerns. You're with an organization that, looking at the mission, you kind of have twofold, or multifold, I should say, protecting federal networks, strengthening critical infrastructure, but also protecting the way of life. So it seems to me that you're kind of your organization is riding between these two challenges. Like, how do we protect against external threats while maintaining our way of life and some of the principles that we hold dear? And so, if you could speak to that a little bit, and your organization also.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me, GNSI. I really have enjoyed the conversation over the past 24 hours, and people have really hit on a lot of points that I think have resonated with me. And so I'm excited to dig into this a bit more. I think two things that I think I wanted to talk about with you all. So I'll answer your question first directly, and then I wanted to give you all a sense of how the policy talks are really going on the Hill. There's been a lot of also action at the executive branch level, where we've seen a lot of executive orders rolled out, and kind of how the Hill is reacting to some of those actions as well. So I'll start with your question first. So I think you're hitting on something that is a huge challenge. Like, we already face so many cybersecurity challenges that are already intensifying in effect. I think you can barely open the news these days without seeing some type of cyber attack that's happening. I think even just a couple of weeks ago, we saw the Volt Typhoon attack, where we found that China had been sitting in critical infrastructure for over 5 years. I think that this, I'm going to hit on this a little bit later, but really speaks to China's strategy and how they are thinking about this competition overall. Really, at the end of the day, it's a competition for influence, and information is key to that success. And so actually that instance in particular was very different from others that we've seen, where it was this more persistent threat, where we saw China sitting and trying to gather information as opposed to, and pre-positioning itself. It was called a living off the land technique, using the infrastructure that was already in place. So we're seeing that. The way that artificial intelligence, I think, fits into this, there's a lot of parallels, I think, with cybersecurity as well. Right now, particularly, I think, from my perch, we've been working with CISA, where we mainly have our jurisdiction. There are a couple new concepts. CISA's role primarily is to work with industry and government partners, and to try to be that coordinator, that trusted partner for everyone to come to provide guidance and information and technical assistance as organizations are trying to ensure that they are resilient and secure. And so I think that a lot of these cybersecurity concepts, one that CISA has talked about is secure by design. They've also talked about this in the context of artificial intelligence. CISA has a plan for artificial intelligence. And I think the way that we see some of these parallels, it speaks to the fact that artificial intelligence, as we have said, is an enabling tool. It's also an amplifying tool. It's going to fundamentally transform the way that we perform specific tasks. It's going to make us more efficient. It's going to have cost savings in the long run. It's going to be more productive. But I think that there's a lot, and there are going to be a lot of questions that we're going to have to answer about how we want to use the tech and what types of applications are appropriate. And I think that these are some of the biggest topics that we've seen kind of take place on the Hill. So I think from that, I'm going to just kind of move into talking about specifically how these dynamics have gone on the Hill and where the conversation is. So I think, as you all have noticed, AI has really grabbed the attention of policymakers. This is very different from anything that I have observed over the years. I will say, from my own standpoint, I used to work in industry for an artificial intelligence company. And I remember trying to engage with different stakeholders, and this really wasn't a big conversation topic except for within very specific contexts. Now you can barely even have a conversation without AI. Without AI coming up, without some type of headline where artificial intelligence is involved. The number of hearings that we even just had on the Hill last year, I think there were over 20 of them, and they were all across committees. So it just shows the level of interest from members in this topic in particular. And that's not even speaking to the insight forums that took place that a group of members in the Senate had led over the course of last year, ranging from many different topics. There's a flurry of legislative proposals that have been coming out, spanning lots of different types of areas, everything from talking about content provenance to deepfakes to some more security specific concerns. So I think it's showing that everybody is recognizing at the end of the day that this is a transformative technology that is going to impact every single aspect of the economy and our national security interests. So it is a very, very different conversation than we were having before. And a lot of this was spurred from ChatGPT. I think that kind of accelerated the hype around this. But I think that another part of it is also because the China threat is recognized. Now, it's not driving every single part of the conversation. I think that is underlying and recognize that we want to stay ahead of China. Anything that we do, we want to make sure that we are not slowing down our innovation. We want to be able to stay ahead. But as I said beforehand, a lot of this is focused on how we are using the tech in society. There's a lot of big questions that I think have really captured the attention of policymakers in trying to figure out when we should use, and has led to a lot of these regulatory conversations as well about when we should regulate, if we should regulate, how we should regulate. And the starting point for a lot of these conversations too is looking at what are the existing laws that we have in place. I think initially when these conversations started, and I think that there's still a growing understanding about this, is that AI is not some monolithic, one-size-fits-all technology. It is a tool, and it is used in very specific applications, and it is used in very specific sectors. And so I think that the conversation has kind of shifted to looking at where are those use cases and how should we be making sure that there are safety measures in place and what is the appropriate role for government to make sure that we are using and developing our technology in a responsible way. So I think another thing I was kind of reflecting on last night and thinking about this question of data was I often say that the Hill is in an information gathering mode. And I took a step back and realized that there's kind of a couple different layers to this. So I think one is actually getting the data that we need to train artificial intelligence models. We need quality data, not necessarily the quantity of data that we have. We need to make sure that it's prepared and ready. We need to know which use cases that we're going to tailor it to. We need to have access to data. This is also a big question, particularly for a lot of small companies who might not have access to the data that they need to show relevance for their products. So working through some of those questions as well. Then there's another part of it, which is getting data to ensure that we have responsible AI practices. I think that a lot of this has come out in a number of proposed reporting requirements or other types of proposals that have come out. Some of them were included in the executive order. Some of them I think are just actively being discussed about how industry should be communicating with government. I will use one example about from the executive order where there's a reporting requirement for companies that create models at specific thresholds to have to turn over to report model weights as well as the cybersecurity practices around those model weights. I think that this is one example where we really have to press ourselves and think about what type of data is useful and what can we act upon, because we want to make sure that we're not overly burdening industry. We want to make sure we're not creating potentially compromising scenarios where companies might have to turn over IP or anything else. And we have to think about the processes that are in place to make sure that we are using this data effectively. And then I think that the last part of info gathering is just the general learning that is taking place on the Hill. I spoke to this a little bit, where I think that members have been, and just broadly, I think within the policymaking community, recognizing that there is a big education gap and that we do need to understand that there are very specific use cases for these technologies. We do have to think through some of these societal questions about where we want to use it. We have to recognize, and I think we also have to put up, we talk a lot about the risks. Some of them, I think we're still trying to define exactly what those risks are and where the gaps are so that we can address them effectively. But I think that there's also an element to it of, I think as we're thinking about some of these risks that exist, is thinking about, again, the role that government wants to play. So I think there's actively a lot of conversations about what is the appropriate scope for legislation and the role that we should play. So I will stop there. I think that there's a lot of interest, I think, that we will continue to see from policymakers as they work through a lot of these questions that we've raised over the course of the 2 days.
Okay, thanks, Alexandra. Before I turn over the questions from the audience, what I'd like to do is give it time for response to your fellow panelists. Mm-hmm. And so we'll start with you, Alexandra, and then we'll just go in the reverse order that we started with.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I completely agree with everything that you had said and had observed from my own experience. I think one thing that I did want to underscore from something that Roberto had said is this theme that had come up yesterday about needing to field even though we still have risks. And trying to move as quickly as possible. Now, I think that we do need to take a step back and be smart about how we're developing these technologies. I do think that there has been a lot of work. I have been really encouraged by the focus on testing, evaluation, verification, and validation over the past couple of days, because I think we do need to pay attention to that. That is our best accountability mechanism, is to develop these types of methods and to make sure that they are integrated into the whole life cycle of an AI model. But I think one of the misconceptions that I think I see is it shouldn't really be this paradigm of we need to move really quickly and we have to compromise security at the same time. We do still need to move fast to field and adopt these systems, in the sense that that is also part of the security process, because without adopting them, we're not going to be able to know exactly all of the things that are going to go wrong. It's like being able to predict every single scenario up front. It's why it makes this AI challenge so hard, because you can't just create some type of checklist in advance where you say, you know, my AI system is performing well against X, Y, and Z, so nothing is going to go wrong and I'm going to deploy it. And a lot of this is dependent on data, because sometimes we don't have the relevant data for the specific operational environment where we're deploying it. And so it needs to be deployed so we can detect those risks. So what we really need to focus on from that end is thinking about the back end for once we have deployed the AI models, is how can we rapidly respond and so that we can mitigate any of these risks that we do see. And I think that taking time to be able to observe some of these risks and the things that go wrong and figure out what works and what doesn't work. Industry also understands their technology and they have thought through some of these processes themselves. And I think that, and it's also how we've seen technology develop over time too, where things do go wrong. Of course, we want to mitigate that impact as much as we can up front. But I think we shouldn't have a hesitancy to field and adopt, because that is the way that we're going to actually get to trust and security.
Hey, thanks, Alexandra. Roberto?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, John, I really appreciate the kind of breakdown that you gave, because I'm in the process of just learning about what your office does. So I just found it really informative. Alexandra, in your case, I did have a question. You talked about the Hill being still kind of like an information gathering mode. Could you talk about a couple of maybe specific examples of particular kinds of AI that where information is being gathered and what that looks like sort of day to day?
Yeah, I think when I say like information gathering mode, I think we're still in, well, I think it's slightly shifting. I do think that there has been a big push for just educating members and staffers alike to understand exactly what it is and how we're approaching AI legislation and figuring out where it is. I think that the interesting thing, because a lot of this is still in, there have been some proposals that have been put out. But I think a lot of the activity we've observed from a legislative standpoint is actually happening at the state level right now, where there's a lot of bills that have been introduced in state legislatures. And interestingly, for our conversation about data, it's a very similar progression to how we've seen the data privacy discussion unfold, where we've seen we've still been working through comprehensive data privacy on the Hill, but we've seen kind of pockets across different states pass their own versions of that. So it's possible we could see some type of similar approach. But yeah, I think from the information gathering stage, I think it's figuring out exactly like what the gaps are for where legislation needs to be, what are the specific issues, and just fully understanding exactly.
Yeah, I know in the Silicon Valley press, oftentimes there's kind of stories about how Congress is behind on understanding technology and that sort of thing. So I'm guessing a lot of what you're talking about is trying to get information about these really complex systems in a way that's comprehensible, right?
Right. And I think part of it is making sure that definitions are clear too, right? How are we defining artificial intelligence and AI system and other terms? Because if you don't scope any of those right, you can have unintended consequences that you may not have meant to set forth.
Alexandra, I really appreciate that you kind of foot-stomped AI as a general purpose technology that is useful when applied to specific use cases. And I think that's absolutely the way that we need to think about it. Roberto, you gave a lot of call outs to people that have had some, I think, very reasonable and appropriate and accurate kind of positions that you argue are kind of counter to the main narrative. I would add one to that list. There's a professor named Jeffrey Ding at George Washington University who has great work on this topic, and he riffs off of comments from Andrew Ng about AI being the new electricity, right? And I think that analogy is probably the most accurate, thinking about the comparison as electricity is a general purpose technology that in the early days of the Department of Defense there was a lot of interest in how were we going to use electricity as a weapon system, right? And that was certainly not the value, right? The value was as the technology was diffused across society and then brought benefits back to the department in terms of communication, in terms of radar, in terms of all these other things. So I think really the foot stomp on general purpose technology is spot on. And I also wanted just to say I really appreciate sort of the critical eye towards the arms race narrative. I think that it's important for us to be careful there. Certainly, you heard in the Deputy Secretary's remarks that the U.S. Does not seek an AI arms race with the PRC nor any arms race. I would add to that the arms race terminology may have some challenges with it, right? In that in a race, you have a known finish line. And I don't think we have a known finish line, right, in kind of where we are. And also going back to the general purpose technology and the value of AI as it is embedded into systems and processes that result in an outcome. In a race, you are rewarded based on the specific skill that's the subject of that competition. And I don't, certainly in the military context, the value that we're looking to create is not going to be measured exclusively by the performance of the model alone, but in how it is used by operators and mission users in the field, in context, right? And that requires a much broader, more holistic, view of the digital transformation that we're on, rather than just thinking about if we're building the better algorithm. I would offer there are some in industry who point out that the department is not spending 1% of its budget on software, and that perhaps that is reason to have some emphasis and dare I say it, enthusiasm around the importance of digital technologies in our national security budget. And so I think part of the reason why we are all here focused on this important topic and looking to advance that is because there is tremendous promise, and in the digital age, we do need to make sure that we have the right level of attention and focus as a proportion of the department's budget.
Hey, John, thanks. I wanted to respond to something you said or ask a question about the arms race. Would you have similar concern with the language competition? Because the competition, you have a winner and a loser, just like you have doing an arms race. So by us talking about strategic competition, great power competition, are we creating the conditions to where we always evaluate where we are in the race against China or other adversaries?
Certainly, the strategic competition between the U.S. and China, I think, has a number of aspects, right? And there are subdomains underneath that in which that competition is manifest. And so in that regard, no, I would not have a concern with the term competition. Now, do we need to specifically call out that there is an AI competition that is framed in sort of the national lens of data, talent, algorithms, and compute? I find that to have maybe less precision than is useful if we're looking at driving investment into the right capabilities for our warfighters to be successful. Yes, so I'm highlighting that the terminology that we use when we paint with too broad a brush may at times be counter to our objectives.
Thank you. One other question, we're at a university and, listening to the panel talk, there's an aspect of educating Congress to understand data and that. Over the 2 days, I heard a human in the loop, and so whenever I hear a human in the loop, I also think, well, there's an education component, right? Because if it's just a human in a loop and they're just part of the process, then you actually give a false sense that we're doing something to mitigate risk, right? With that said, there's been a huge push I've noticed in DoD and other places for STEM education. As a liberal arts major, I kind of think to myself, are we underappreciating, the liberal arts and other folks who can, get to some of the issues that you raised, Roberto, about actually looking at the data and challenging the data and not just appreciating the technology. So my question is, what is the right type of education for that person in the loop and for us to understand the risk inherent in the technology involved in data dominance?
Sure. Yeah, it seems like that would be up my alley. One of the things that I constantly have to remind students at my university is that data isn't just numbers. Right? I mean, that's one form of data, quantitative data. But what we anthropologists do is cultural anthropologists collect qualitative data, which is really important for making all kinds of assessments. And it's much more subjective, obviously, but it's really important because you can have all the quantitative data in the world, but you're still not going to have anything that's meaningful unless you've got the critical eye to make sense of it all. I've got, there are anthropologists working in the military universities that I think are trying to do that work of giving students at those institutions that kind of qualitative data experience and understanding. So yeah, I think there's a big role for the humanities in general, for social sciences certainly, whether it's anthropology or psychology, to really make meaningful sense of the data that's out there, the quantitative data that's out there.
Alexander, John?
Yeah, David, I'll jump in. I think what you're hitting on underscores the importance of thinking about human-machine teaming and that it's not just about the technology that we deliver, but it's also about how the human interacts with that technology, again, to get after that outcome. And so there's a lot of great work in the academic space and in the research space within DoD to think through those dynamics of human machine teaming. And so we can't lose sight of that, right? And so certainly within CDAO, we're focused to a large degree on those technical skills, right? How do we provide baseline digital literacy across the total force? How do we ensure that the world-class training and education resources are available to practitioners? And how do we ensure that senior leaders and general officers have the right digital acumen to drive investments in the right type of technologies? Because that is really commander's business and not just something relegated to the IT department. That is a principal focus of ours. But your comment about the dynamics and the type of education that needs to be adjusted and updated in light of the pervasiveness of this technology is really spot on.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that. I think there's also almost a branding element to this when we talk about STEM, because I think that oftentimes people who are not very technically minded, they think that there's a very high barrier to entry to be involved in the STEM ecosystem because perhaps they're not interested in, mathematics or computer science, but their perspective is also needed to get at some of these problems. And I don't think that's, from the ground up, starting K through 12, all the way through universities. I think it's just something we have to think critically about how to enhance that exposure, to bring more people in to talk about these issues and to show that you can be involved even if you're not the one who's sitting there and doing the coding. Because I think that there are, as we've been talking about, beyond just the technical challenges that we face in developing these tools, we have to think about the more important thing is where we want to use them, and that is going to have societal impacts. And I think there's another end to this too, that we do live in a very technologically advanced society where we're using technology every single day. It's integrated into our daily lives. And so I think also just from a young age, getting everybody comfortable with using those technologies and figuring out how to best use them to enhance their own productivity and to leverage them and harness them for all the benefits that they can bring.
I also like to encourage the audience. You had a great article on War on the Rocks a year ago. We talk about micro-credentialing and some ways to think about different approaches to education. So recommend that article. Some questions from the audience. I'm going to try to tie them together. The first one is, how is the U.S. government ensuring that the data it purchases from industry is ethically collected? And does that put us at a strategic disadvantage as our adversaries don't share our ethics? And then why, along with that question, there's a question that focuses on national and personal security related to stuff like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, and the threats that poses to security. So if you comment on both the ethical aspect and how that advantages us or disadvantages us, and then some of the security issues with 23andMe and the data being out there. And so, John, I'll begin with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to start. I would offer that, and this is something that the Deputy Secretary has said in her remarks on AI, that the U.S. will prevail here, including in the AI and the technology space, not in spite of our values, but because of our values, right? So it is. I think it's perhaps missing a bit to say we're going to have to struggle against our own values, that we won't collect on U.S. persons or violate privacy or do all these things in our national security objectives, and so we need to overcome that. Rather it is because of our American values that we will have the society that can responsibly build these capabilities and have the trust in our nation and in our warfighters to use them and use them well. So I think that, Roberto, riffing off of your opening here on challenging the narratives, I would ask that we think critically about this narrative of we have to win in spite of our values. And then certainly in terms of the acquisition of data, just as there's a large push towards software bill of materials and understanding the provenance and lineage of software, we will certainly see the same, right, in terms of the provenance of data. That is both generated in one part of the federal government, and then as it transits across organizations, we need to understand that provenance. We also need to understand it as it comes in from industry.
Thanks, John. Alexandra, could you touch a little bit on how Congress is looking at I know you talked a little bit about the legislation and the ethics, and in the approach. What I think about is, GDPR in the EU and their data protection that they've imposed at the broad EU level. It seems to tie in right to this question on the ethics side. I wonder if you can comment how Congress is looking at that, because it seems a lot of times, maybe it's the nature of the way that we're structuring the United States, but we've deferred to the states like California and others to take the first move.
Yeah, and I think I kind of mentioned that in my not in my opening remarks, my follow-on remarks about how a lot of the states are looking at this issue. I will say I think one benefit of that type of approach is that you can try out a lot of different ways to approach whether it's data privacy or artificial intelligence, and to figure out what makes the most sense before we apply it at like a national level. So I think I don't know how much more. I mean, we're still considering comprehensive data privacy, which would be our version of some type of GDPR type move. I think that Congress is slow and deliberative for a reason. We want to make sure that we get it right and to work through a lot of these issues. And so I think these conversations will just continue to be ongoing. We will still see state activity in the meantime.
Okay.
I just want to put in my 2 cents here. I've been invited a couple of times over the past year to speak by political scientists, actually in EU countries, and it's difficult to explain to them why we don't have anything like GDPR in this country. At least the ones that I was speaking with. When I told them about the amount of money, lobbying dollars that go from tech to Congress, they're just kind of stunned. I mean, it is comparable to what the big defense companies, and frankly, the Amazons and the Microsofts are big defense companies now. That's the fact of the matter. But the difference is that that lobbying is done for a reason, and I can just speak, right? I'm an academic here. It does play a role in, I think, slowing down the process and not allowing this country to have the kind of regulation, the kind of race to the top, to use Paul Charet's term from his 4 Battlegrounds book, that I think Europe is the EU anyways committed to. So I just really think that's important for us to understand. That's part of what makes this country very different from the EU, and I think that's something that's really hurting us in the end.
So next question's directly is addressed to you, Mr. Turner. DoD is trying to understand how generative AI and LLMs can be used in a trusted manner. Can you describe the mission of Task Force Lima at CDAO?
Absolutely. The Deputy Secretary established Task Force Lima as the department's central mechanism to drive the sharing and collaboration of our experimentation on large language models. So as this capability emerges, as we need to understand the use cases, the risks, and the deployment models of generative AI, that learning, that campaign of experimentation and learning needs to happen in a shared way across the organizations. And so Task Force Lima is the department's sort of central mechanism to share those lessons. And really one of the main things that is coming out of Task Force Lima, in addition to guidance issued by CDAO to the department based on the collective learnings, it is also a lot of thinking around a maturity model for LLMs and generative AI. And so as an analogy, you can think about a maturity model for autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars, right? We know that the term, self-driving vehicle is not is not precise enough. And so there is a maturity model that kind of speaks to the degree of sophistication. We would likewise in the generative AI for defense arena argue that we need to understand the type of use cases that generative AI would be applied to, and then the acceptability criteria that the model would need to adhere to, so that we ensure that we're using this technology for the right use cases, and we're employing the rigor that is appropriate for the mission and the outcome. And so thinking through that maturity model to really build maybe a more rich and precise understanding of how this technology will be applied within defense, that's one of the main goals of Task Force Lima.
Hey, thanks, John. We only have a few minutes left, so what I'd like to do is we'll start with you, Alexandra. 30 seconds, last thoughts, comments that you'd like to leave the audience with to close it out.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think this was a great conversation. I think one of the other aspects of data is also thinking about, because we were talking about how we don't want to collect data, of course, in the same way as authoritarian actors. We also want to make sure that we're protecting our data from authoritarian actors as well. I think we've seen a lot of those types of conversations, whether it's been around something like TikTok or drones collecting information. I think we recognize China's approach, and we want to make sure that we are protecting our own U.S. person information from them being able to use it. And I think that we're going to continue to see a lot of these discussions on AI unfold, and data will kind of be at the center of it, protecting U.S. person data and ensuring that our systems are resilient.
Thank you. John?
One of the key ways that we will understand the maturity of the department's foundation of quality data is understanding the speed at which we are sharing data across organizational boundaries. And that's not just a technology problem, that's largely a people and process problem. And so for all of those on the government side, would just welcome the continued focus on treating data as an enterprise resource and thinking about having those conversations between data producers and data consumers in a responsible but efficient manner. Because it is when we're sharing data across organizational boundaries, when we have that discussion between producers and consumers about the level of data quality that's necessary for the consumer's need, it is only then that we'll be able to deliver at speed a lot of these capabilities where we want net new value and capability that is only going to be achieved by sharing data across organizational boundaries. And so your efforts on that and industry's efforts in helping us align to an open data standards architecture that allows for that transport of data across the ecosystem is really key to our success.
Thanks. Roberto?
Yeah, two last thoughts. One is that, the title of this panel has the phrase data dominance in it, and I don't think we spent a whole lot of time talking about that. But when I first saw the phrase, the thing that immediately came to mind is well, it would be the social media companies really that are the truly dominant forces when it comes to data. I mean, this is essentially how they are valued as highly as they are in monetary terms. So I think there needs to be more of a discussion about that as well, because one of the questions I think was skirting around that issue, that if the U.S. is accessing this information, and feels bound by ethical issues and other countries don't, how does that play out? The other point I want to conclude with is just a kind of global vision here. This is a GNSI event, and I think it's really important to think about not only in terms of data dominance, but also AI and technology in general, and really investigate how is it that other countries are solving the kinds of problems that we're confronting here in the United States. And one of the things that's been really rewarding to me as an anthropologist is it's given me the opportunity to travel to different parts of the world, to live years of my life in other cultures, and the creativity of other societies and the way they solve things, often with far fewer resources than we have, is really inspiring. So I just want to finish with that pitch for anthropology, that it can inform issues of national security in some really surprising ways.
Thank you. If we could thank our panelists. So I'll turn it back over to you, Adib. I took a minute from you. I apologize.
and to our panelists. And we'll take a quick pause, not a break, a quick pause for us to reset the stage for our next panel. Thank you. I think we're ready to go, so can I please ask everyone to kindly take their seats for our next panel? About 30 more seconds, please. Come on. Plenty seats up front. Okay, we are ready to begin our fourth panel, discussion addressing small states' perspectives on AI and global security. Our esteemed moderator for this panel is Dr. Galfo Laxopoulos, Director of the Institute of Russian, European, and Eurasian Studies at the University of South Florida. Dr. Laxopoulos teaches a variety of courses on topics related to contemporary Russian politics and society, modern Europe, and the Soviet Union. Her current work examines the thread that connects 20th century Soviet and 20th century Russian authoritarianism, especially in the disinformation space. Her most recent book, Illness and Inhumanity in Stalin's Gulag, examines the system of violent human exploitations in the Stalinist forced labor camps between 1929 and 1953. So I'll turn over the discussion now to my good colleague Galfo, who will facilitate the discussion and lead the Q&A session that follows. Please.
Thank you so much, Adib. It really is my distinct pleasure to moderate this panel. Before I introduce the panelists, let me just say just a brief word about how this panel emerged. We have a partnership with the J3 International Division at U.S. Special Operations Command, and we're just so grateful for this partnership that's been ongoing now for 3, maybe even 5 years. So our partners at the J3I reached out to some of their colleagues in Europe, and we've been having this ongoing series of events for several years now. So we're really grateful for this partnership, which IRIS launched, and now GNSI is partnering with us on it. So we hope it continues. On this panel on small states' perspectives on AI and global security, we have Joel Brynilsson, the research director at the Swedish Defense Research Agency and associate professor at the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. Peter Bouvier-Emmanuel, researcher at the Swedish Defense University's Center for Special Operations Research. Juha Kukkola, officer in the Finnish Defense Forces and expert in strategic and cyber and Russian studies. And Vilma Luma-Aho, professor of corporate communication and vice dean at the University of Jyväskylä in Finland. And let me just note that the opinions expressed in this panel are those of the panelists and do not reflect the views of their respective institutions. So I'd like to begin by asking each of the panelists to give us just a few opening remarks on this topic of small states' perspectives on AI and global security. And Joel, if you would get us started, please.
Yes, and I like to do that using a few slides. So let's see here if something happens. Yes. All right, yeah, so that's me. So I'm Joel, and I'm research director at the Swedish Defense Research Agency, and I consider myself an AI researcher for the past 25 years. Writing a thesis 18 years ago on game theoretic approaches to probabilistic expert systems, and that proved to be a good way to get into difficulties and the AI arena, because nowadays everything is about combining LLMs and game theoretic approaches. So it's very topical right now. And for the small state perspective, I think as you know, there is only one defense research agency in Sweden. So everything is small. So everything I say is related to a small state perspective here. This is a slide I showed 5 years ago, and 5 years is a long time ago. And the main conference, as you know, for neural networks and for neural information processing was then already on the 32nd round. So it was back at then already AI was an old topic. And I showed this at a conference in, I think, January or February 2019. At the political conference, which is the most foremost one in Sweden, is in the north of Sweden in a skiing resort. So 8,500 participants, that's a lot. That's not what we usually see in science, and lots of submissions. So it's more related as a pop concert or something. And I think some of you knew about this, and the tickets were sold out in 11 minutes and 38 seconds. So AI has become a hype. That's the key message here. And and we need to, in Sweden at least, we need to accept that the civilian research is the driver, and we need to learn about that and apply it for defense and security. And the quote there is from a famous person having data sets. Comparing it with a rock concert. So let's move 5 years forward. Then this is what we see now with generative AI coming up, and public intelligence reporting from this country goes out public and tells us about how and attributes attacks to various nations and persons and so on. Yes. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned much during this conference, I think, is astroturfing. So it's not just about deep fakes and distinguishing between what is right and wrong, but it's also affecting people's opinions for a long time, which you can do effectively by introducing a small bias in LLMs and so on. The emergence, the last since 2018, the first slide and the next slide, we can see here where the red line is the transformer models that we see today are taking over from deep learning, which is the blue line. So there is an exponential model growth. We have the compute time in a logarithmic scale on the y-axis, and we have the time scale on the x-axis. Then I like to go back to 2018 again and just provide a statement here on recruitment. And here is the Google classifier for figures, where you have 1,000 pixels as input and output. No, you have all the pixels as input and output is the class. So it's an image classifier. And of course, you can see there also the different parts of the deep learning module doing different things. And hopefully out comes a class. And it would be good if this class is the right one. But it is easy to fool this, and you have seen examples of this before, I'm sure. And what we do is we look at the model, we run it backwards, we do not change the weights in the model, we keep that fixed, and we change the intensities in the pixels in the figure. So the two mean events to the left, they are totally different, or they're different in every pixel. So we change the intensities for 15 iterations, and after 15 iterations, we made the minivan go from a minivan into a dog, I think. So that is dangerous, and we do not want that to happen. And the thing is that what we used to do this was writing 5 rows of code. And my key message here is that today AI is not about programming, it's about writing these 5 rows of code. So we need to think of recruitment in that it is not about having recruiting programmers writing lots of code, but it's rather recruiting people that know how to read research papers and get into the research frontier and understand what to do. And that is a problem in Sweden. I have a colleague who wanted to recruit for cybersecurity for my agency, and that was some years ago, and we looked into how many PhDs do we develop with Swedish citizenship that can actually be employed at our agency, and I think it was 10. So 10 possible employees for the Swedish Defense Research Agency. And also they want to, you should have a low salary and want to work for the state and so on. So no one, I don't think we managed to recruit a single person. So we have a very hard time recruiting the right persons. You can also synthesize video, and this is also a very old example, but my key message here is that everything is on the net. So here's my webpage at the university, and here's my face. And if you steal that and you take a model, you add these together, and you can have the input here is another video, and you have a photo showing me, and you can easily just bring this together, and this can be done in 15 minutes and make this video. And this was back in 2020, right? So today these techniques are impossible to distinguish. So the generative models, I think this is a problem and a fantastic opportunity, which we're going to see more of in the future. So generative AI has led to fantastic things and also very scary things. And possibly someone saw this also a few years back when it comes to text. So today we generate texts, and it is impossible for a human to distinguish between these texts. This is done by OpenAI, where 52% means detection rate means you throw a dice, basically, and it is very hard to distinguish. Okay, so that was some old research, and let's get into some new research then, because we heard yesterday about the AlphaGo being something that happened and so on, and it is the AI today is made to solve problems and put forward the absolutely best solutions. But for a human, it is not always the best solution that is the best, but you need to also be able to resonate and argue like a human person. And usually you need to think just one step ahead and not several steps ahead. So we need to look into behavioral game theory and just beat the opponent by thinking one step ahead. And to combine that with large language models and play diplomacy. So diplomacy here is a game that is played to. You need to argue and have collaborate with people and so on. So that's our current research agenda, to look into this kind of AI and try to develop decision support systems that can be used for strategic interaction. We haven't got very far, but next year I will be able to provide with the results. And also, since it's a small state perspective, I think I have a wall of text here it is very important for us to focus on the very right questions. And these are the questions I think we should focus on. This is the research agenda we have gone into deeper at the Defense Research Agency and have projects on and so on. The first 4 bullets are something we have started with 10 years ago or so. And then the bullets in the end, let me look at these. Yeah, you can see the new things about acting unpredictably, and you need to look into the large language models and so on. Automation of work is a very important thing to look into. And automation of work is about looking into the occupations we have in cybersecurity, in the military profession, and so on, and go down and look at the skills and abilities and how these can be automated. And I think I will stop there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes. Thank you. I couldn't help myself when I listened to General Fenton. He commented his picture. And when I see my picture, there's a bit of a difference. If that is AI's transformative power, or rather human indetermination, and perhaps context-based adaptation when it comes to the glasses, I'm not sure. But I engage in how AI is impacting modern warfare and warfighting at the only defense university in Sweden. More specifically, I'm building AI models to understand the role and functions of AI in decision making, in specifically targeting with limited information and emergent targets. Having spent 25 years with the Special Forces, I find myself well suited to discuss what it's like being small and with limited resources compared to more strategic competitors. I also would like to thank all the previous panelists, because they made me change my reflections points. So a bit scattered here, but I would like to share as an opening 4 reflections related to the question of how do we want to use AI. And in support of these reflections, I use 2 assumptions that's actually presenting itself in many of the strategic visions and investments as of today, which is AI is becoming an intellectual a necessity. And modern warfare will have to increase automation, robotics, autonomy, and collaborative work with artificial intelligent agents to restore contemporary mismatches in decision-making, C2 arrangement, and joint concepts. So first, we know that the amount of data and information, as well as the speed, challenges our human cognitive abilities, as well as some of the paradigms of human in command and control, and our ability to manage situational awareness in operations. We could perceive AI and automation as resources, safeguarding the integration of relevant information, expanding the decision space through rapid optional approaches, etc., in order to optimize decision-making, as well as command and control of an increasingly larger body of AI-enabled forces and assets. Integrations of AI to mitigate for human limitations are likely to come at a cost. Allowing AI to be part of decision-making calculus implies making trade-offs, such as less human control. Decision advantages will probably have to include the acceptance of a new decision continuum, as I call it. This will require human judgment, as have been discussed, or perhaps professional judgment. But how will we educate our leaders for that? That's a question to be answered, I would argue. Secondly, a short reflection on speed, because everyone has been talking about speed as part of time, perhaps, concept. But if modern warfare will continue to adopt AI-empowered sensors and weapon systems, then this will enable rapid combat engagement. In turn, it may put pressure on the next level of command, and so on. And somewhere along that chain of command, that pace or tempo will have to slow down to allow for strategic thinking and diplomatic or political discussions. So we need to find some kind of pacemaker here when it comes to warfare. Thirdly, AI is pushing the boundaries of what is possible. It challenges cherished beliefs and contemporary paradigms. And from a special forces and special operations perspective, this could actually offer opportunities to start creating chameleons by treating SOF as assemblages with a variety of functions, core tasks, and missions, or ride the waves, as General Fenton mentioned. It could unlock a forthcoming era of special operations with fewer boundaries and more freedom to adapt to changing environments and strategic requirements. That could provide latitude for new special operations assemblages, not least for small states. I argue that treating special forces as assemblages will unlock those new conceptions and would contour emergent designs and employment, making them chameleons, more pertinent and versatile and less contained to create new dilemmas to the adversary at a low cost. That would be like a David and Goliath thing, low cost and high effect. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you so much. Juha?
Okay, is the mic on?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Kolfo, and thank you for having me in this panel. For my opening remarks, I offer some thoughts on AI from the perspective of a small state neighboring a hostile authoritarian great power, aka Russia. Finland and Sweden are located next to Russia, and that is a thing that we cannot change. And Russia is very interested in developing AI solutions for economic purposes, for controlling its own society, for information warfare, and for conventional and nuclear warfare. Russia's technology development and innovation potential may be weaker than the United States or China's, but its AI R&D is comparatively well-resourced, and patriotism is an effective tool for mobilizing researchers in Russia. Russia tries to find asymmetric answers to strategic problems and asymmetric means for the battlefield also. As AI is not a single thing, Russia may succeed in developing some niche capabilities in the future, and it will most definitely try to use AI-based systems and advanced robotics in the next war. Thus, development of AI capabilities is of critical importance for Finland and for Sweden's national security, as we are small states next to Russia. Although both states have high technological innovation potential, modern digital infrastructure, and skilled workforce, we have very limited resources concerning like microchip, large data sets, and of course money. Therefore, everything related to AI cannot be done nationally in small states. But of course, some critical AI systems must be developed nationally. The question remains, what systems, how, and by whom? Which things are critical? What are the systems where we can rely and trust somebody else? And who can we trust? Should we try to acquire cutting-edge technology or trust in tried and tested good enough technology, which will become obsolete very fast? And concerning autonomous systems, should we concentrate on mass or quality, stock our warehouses, or rely on crisis-time supply chains to deliver us what we need? Should we try to be leaders in some AI technology area and become dependent on our allies and partners in others? What are the markets that we should target as small states to have basis for a sufficient national AI economy? Finland is trying to find answer to these questions about AI development. Finland has had an AI strategy and development program since 2017. There are government and private innovation investment programs and cooperation mechanisms in place. Finnish Defence Forces is cooperating with university researchers, for example, with Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence in Aalto University. Finland is taking part in EU and NATO procurement and innovation programs, and Finland is using the existing national comprehensive security framework to mobilize support for AI development. We have chosen to become NATO members, so we are not trying to do everything by ourselves. However, developing and procuring AI technologies is not enough in itself. A rule-based world order is important for small states as it increases stability, trust, and predictability. Unfortunately, transparency, predictability, and confidence building concerning AI might be difficult to achieve, as we have heard in previous panels yesterday and today. To address these issues, Finland has joined the Declaration on Responsible Military Use of Artificial Intelligence and Autonomy, prepared under the leadership of the United States. Finland will participate in international discussions to further develop the principles of the declaration. Also, as a EU member state, Finland is taking part in AI regulation development in the civilian sphere by implementing the EU AI Act. But what about when the rules break? Because Finland is logistically almost an island, an enemy can try to isolate us from allies and supplies by using autonomous systems, for example. These systems can also be used to destroy critical infrastructure and terrorize the population, and AI can be used to manipulate the information environment. Autonomous platforms and AI will be used by the enemy to support the achieving of information, air, sea, and land superiority. That is why national AI-enhanced capabilities to gather intelligence, monitor the multi-domain battle space, and to deny the freedom of movement and to destroy enemy autonomous assets is important, even in peacetime, for a small state. So to conclude, Russia and China have somewhat different approach to AI, information warfare, and the basic rules of the international order than the West. This may lead to political and technological fragmentation and technological alliances which guard their capabilities jealously. Small states have little room for maneuver in this kind of situation. Thus, for a small state neighboring a hostile authoritarian great power, the choice in fragmenting world is simple but hard. We can either ally and integrate with a friendly technological power with similar values. We can adopt a high-risk strategy and try to make it alone, or we can stop existing even as a small state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Vilma.
Sure. So, very good afternoon or morning, it might still be. Greetings from a very new NATO member. We've been there for a while now, and we like to think ourselves as the superpower next to our small nation of Russia. Why, you ask? Partly because we were the only nation within the last wars that actually managed to be independent after the late developments and everything that happened. And in that sense, even though we are a small nation, we have something that we like to call sisu. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that word. There's actually a new movie out there with that word as well. So if you want to know about it, see the movie. Sisu is kind of like grit. And that is something that small nations develop when you have to have stamina in an environment that is impossible to survive in. And this kind of stamina, you can't buy it. It has to be produced under stress. And small nations are always under some form of stress. Now, this is a panel on small states, but actually I would argue that we are the well-to-do, better off part of the world's small states. We are the Nordic welfare states. We have so many things that many of the world's other small states don't have. So what you're listening to is actually kind of put on your filter of these are the Nordic people talking about their happy life kind of thing. But I have 3 points today. So I guess the question is always, why are you here? I'm here probably because of my dual roles. So in addition of serving as the vice dean and being a professor of communication at the business school in Jyväskylä in Finland, I also am on the board of advisors of the National Defense University in Finland and also chair the social science division of Matine, which is actually a special unit put together by the Ministry of Defense in Finland to bring together everything that the academics in social science know about defense and put that into action for the ministry in practice, almost real time as it develops. So, 3 points, that's what I promised. First point, I'd like to suggest that we are actually in an age of unpeace, which comes from a very popular book nowadays. And in that environment, there is no longer a clear division between war and peace. That means that we can't really have a peace mentality in people's minds, and we cannot have a war mentality because that wears you out. And in that kind of world, there is a division between negative peace and positive peace. We are very much actually in the stages of a positive peace environment at the moment. And When you're talking about an age of unpeace, it's often a question of, well, what is true and what is not true, and there is misinformation or even proven disinformation. But that, I would argue, is actually a cultural trait. Only in Western linear cultures is truth considered scientific by facts. In many other countries, for example, in Russia, we could argue that they are multi-active cultures, where truth is actually something that's negotiated. It's not based on facts. Facts play into it, but you have to have a dialogue with the people to realize what is the joint truth. And then there are some countries where truth is more reactive in the sense that it's focused around societal harmony. And you have to figure out who in society needs to be at peace with this topic that we now call truth. And before you have everybody at peace, it's not considered a truth. And now us, coming from this linear active kind of world where we think it's only facts, it's very strange that we are demanding everybody else to act when AI develops in the way that we expect it to be, which is factual and make sure that it represents everything that's scientifically proven, when most of the world is not built in that way, not built on around these kinds of facts. But that's my first point, age of unpeace. And for young and small nations, I think preparedness is in our DNA. So we have to be partnering, we have to be collaborating, we have to be prepared for everything. And a funny note, Finns and Swedes, we're really into freezing stuff. You know, we have like a summer that's like maybe a week or so. And we have this joke, summer is very short in Finland. Last year it happened on a Tuesday. The freezing of blueberries and strawberries is really good, you know. This is something that's in the mentality of all the small nations. And this is something that's missing from the superpowers. You don't see the need to save something for later on because there will be plenty and abundance. And I'm guessing this could be something that you guys could actually learn from us. Besides, strawberries are really good in the middle of the winter. Okay, second point. Communication is increasingly vulnerable in the AI era to hijacking, meaning that somebody hostilely takes over what you're saying. And deepfakes are common in that sense. And I guess this is becoming a new business. So my example is of, I think he's from Iceland, this funny Instagrammer called Grape Jokes. His jokes are borderline funny. They're kind of like dad jokes, but, you know, not always politically correct. And his account was actually taken over without him really knowing, and of course copied into 15 different accounts. And these 15 different accounts, fake accounts, post all the same stuff that he posts with his kid, with his comments, with stuff that's going on. The only difference is he doesn't have on those fake accounts as many followers as on the real account. And of course the fake accounts are asking the followers for money. So what's happening is that these fake accounts are actually monetizing the parasocial relation that this influencer has built with these audiences. And because of the parasocial relationship, he's borrowing the trust that he has earned. And it's become a business model, kind of banking onto somebody else's points in there. Now, what do we say in small nations related to this? I guess one thing we've always been accustomed to is language barrier protecting us. Because nobody else speaks our language, you know, nobody bothers to learn the language. If you want to learn Finnish, talk to me afterwards. It's something that's not happening anymore because AI is actually breaking this barrier. AI speaks pretty good Finnish now. Still not perfect, as I read in my students' essays, but getting there. And another thing that's protecting us usually is social media and also media literacy, that we're able to kind of tell which part is true, which part is untrue. But at the same time, these are also something that we have to relearn because social media is changing the whole literacy environment. And to my last point, Golf was looking like she's ready with this, like move over. I like to suggest that, and this is something that comes from the Army Cyber Institute, we have the new weapons of digital mass destabilization ahead of us. So it's not like we're destructing something in real time, but we're just destabilizing the way people are behaving and what they're thinking. And in this kind of thing, we like to talk about situational vulnerability. What are the situations in which our people are the most vulnerable? What are the situations in which our software is the most vulnerable? when are we as the whole nation most vulnerable? And of course, research would suggest elections, times of decision making, times of change, stress, financial pressures, and I guess you could say that all of these are this year. So we're vulnerable in many ways. And what does this mean for small nations? We like to brag that we have a really high trust in authorities, and we call it generalized trust. So basically it means if you trust your neighbor, if you trust the tax people, you are very easily likely to trust everybody else in society, hence making life very easy because you don't need contracts. You don't have to worry that somebody will sue you in Finland or Sweden. So go ahead, bump into our cars. It's, going to be okay. And it also means that there's going to be a lot of agile decision making. This is something we're quite good at. There was a discussion about NATO membership in Finland for decades. We changed our mind in one day. Everybody in the whole society was for it. There was no public debate. It was more like agreed on. And this is actually something that I would ask my Swedish colleagues because Finland and Sweden did a different process in this. And granted, we have different legislation. So in Sweden, you can burn religious documents. In Finland, you can't burn religious documents. So I guess part of the kind of astroturfed attention and dialogue that started off there was due to this Quran burning that happened in Sweden. You know what happened in Finland? The police confiscated the Qurans that were about to be burned. And the joke is you can have them back the day after we got the NATO membership. So I don't know if they were returned. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a really fascinating discussion from these two new NATO members, both small states that border a hostile nuclear power. And they did raise a number of problems and challenges. The fact that they're small, they only have one research institute, one defense agency, they've limited resources, but that they deal with these challenges by forming alliances, being more resilient, and developing what Vilma called grit and stamina. I want to push you a little further on this and ask you how, because the way that you framed it, some of these challenges you've managed to overcome. How many of these challenges do you find really intractable and difficult to deal with, even in light of your strong alliances? And what are some of the solutions, do you think, moving forward to some of the challenges that you face as small states bordering a very hostile state?
Well, I can try and start at least. What struck me was linked to previous panels yesterday, talking about use cases, actually, and the importance of use cases and how you frame those use cases, because in two ways. I mean, one, if we have AI, since that's the topic, then we need to be pragmatic when we build those use cases, because we need to try and reflect reality, and not be hindered by ethics or current legislation, because I believe that if you do that, if you build your use cases from reality and realism, then that appreciation of the ethics and legislation and being responsible and so on will have something tangible to grasp, rather than the opposite. That will only be a hinder. Secondly, I think we need use cases from the opposite direction, because we might fool ourselves here and have self-inflicted vulnerabilities built in. So I mean, we have a diverse battlefield in Ukraine at the moment with trench warfare and modern AI-empowered drones flying overhead. So we need to be wary about when it fails. I mean, it's an old saying in at least soft communities that low tech when you can and high tech if you have to. And I think that has to go along with also the strategic thinking on use cases, because what happens if we lack what we have is that ladder. If we fall down a step, can we even reach up again, or are we confined at a level where we won't be able to use what we thought we had to use, and have we prepared ourselves for it? So I think use cases are a good thing, and being pragmatic when you build those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. A military perspective for this question. The solutions, one thing is, of course, the education of military future and current military leaderships. That's something we are doing at the National Defense University. On AI and autonomous systems. It's a developing field, and there's lots of work to do still, because we don't really understand the issues. When we are looking what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, when we are looking at what's happening in the cyberspace, it's constantly changing. And taking everything from all the observations that we are making and putting that in the curriculum of future officers, it's a lot of job to do for a small state. And that's why defense cooperation and intelligence sharing, I think, is a critical component also for answering the solutions concerning AI in the future. And about Russia, I study Russian, I have researched Russian indirect and asymmetric warfare, and my personal opinion is that we should fight fire with fire. There has been a lot of ethics, talk about ethics here, and I totally agree. But we shouldn't tie our hands behind our backs, because they are not going to do that. And we should try to find AI and autonomous system solutions which have critical destabilizing strategic effects if we need to use them. So that's a military point of view. Thanks.
Joel or Vilma, what are possible solutions to some of these challenges of small states?
Well, I can give it a try. So the way it looks to me is that democracy is being used against us at the moment. So we're kind of victims of our own system. We are enabling and we're empowering the voices that are being used against us, which is less of a problem in less democratic settings. I guess one solution to this is to think about all development, not just dual use, but like trial or quadruple or 5 times use, in the sense that when you're developing something in a small nation, you're not developing it just for the military use, you're developing it for potential range of different futures, different scenarios. And it could be also thought of as a life cycle, kind of like a life cycled thing, something that has come to an end, especially when it comes to equipment, could be utilized in several unpredictable ways. But as for solving this kind of a challenge, I think especially the Nordic countries are really good at self-criticism. Europeans in general, we're really good at criticizing ourselves. So if you ever go back to Europe, self-criticism, something Americans often lack, it's appreciated there. So in that sense, I guess we're really good at learning what went wrong. And in that way, I know this is a new challenge, but there are always lessons to be learned from what did we do wrong and why did we do wrong that. And this is something many organizations, especially military organizations, don't really have a lot of time devoted to it. Of course, yes, when it comes to operations, but when it comes to these kind of unheard tacit information, things that were kind of hinted at, we don't have systems to mark everything down. So not all the risks are always mapped out there, and it's something that's inherited in the knowledge, but not always explicitly discussed.
Yeah, I do not have much to add, but I think workforce development is a key issue to Sweden. There are very few people that can take the jobs that we need to fill. And also I think we need to be agile in terms of working between organizations, between authorities, and we talk about Sweden AB, Sweden the organization, so that we need to collaborate and not do the same thing in several agencies, for example. Work together as a team. That's important. Thanks.
So before I turn to more AI-related questions, I want to pick up on this theme of education, because everyone on this panel teaches. You're involved in a university or a research institute. You're involved in training. And in our audience, we have a lot of students and they're interested in how AI will shape the workforce of the future. So what advice or thoughts do you have for young people who are anticipating a workforce that will be utterly changed by AI? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I can start there. But we did some work. Actually, it was one of the bullets I showed you, which I think is important to think about. And of course, there are many reasons for jobs to be automated, but there is quite some research on that, and it boils down to what skills and abilities are needed in the future. So this research typically looks into a whole profession and what needs to be done in that profession. For example, cybersecurity, you can take the standards here from United States. NIST has a cybersecurity workforce framework, which comes down to about 1,000 skills and abilities that needs to be fulfilled. And this can be automated to a various extent. And of course, not all will, but you need to look into what skills and abilities that can be automated and learn the ones that has potential for the future and will be necessary to fulfill. And the things to look out for then would be creativity. Does the job require lots of creativity, like a research profession or something like that? And that's something that is hard to automate, but it's not super hard. So that's, in a research, it can be automated to a fair extent. Social interaction is hard to automate. Physical work is fairly easy to automate, and statistical data is something to look for. Is there statistical data available for learning, for machine learning? And typical jobs, of course, these parameters relate to each other. But yeah, I think you should think of future jobs in these terms. Lawyers will be very hard to automate. Database administrators will be easy to automate. So that would be my advice for students.
Well, okay. So I could be next. Interesting question. I mean, there's so many layers to it from a military perspective, or let's say from a leader perspective. I would argue that in Sweden, at least, we have a discussion on stepping up and reaching the level that is required. Because nowadays, when you engage in actually decisions for integrations of AI, you cannot just state that I take responsibility. You might not even know what kind of responsibility you are taking. So rather you need to be able to take responsibility, and that requires a bit more of a technical skill set, but some kind of level, so that you know what you're dealing with, because this is not just the ordinary challenges that we've had. these are new challenges. When it comes to education, I mean, start educating yourselves in it, because I think we have. I mean, at any given time, you will have a society divided into different ages and knowledges. So I think there could be room for leveraging the use of the younger generation, actually guiding the older generation in this matters. And to some extent, in Sweden at least, it's already, I mean, AI is being implemented all over. Perhaps not so much in the more conservative and traditional labor of military, but I mean, we have, I mean, in cities we have already, they are implementing AI systems to a certain, social, what's it called? So the social money that you would get to ensure that everyone is treated the right way, that's already implemented in some cities in Sweden. And the bank systems are already using it. And we are, in fact, using it every day, all of us. So, I mean, we are hyping some parts of AI and we're already accepting it. So the gradual shift here is also something that we should perhaps be wary about, because we are just slowly but steadily accepting it, and some of the more hyped versions or they might get some attention, but behind our back we're already doing it, at least in Sweden.
Okay, my short advice is to get a technical education to at least understand what's happening. And it's easier to get a technical education when you are young, believe me, because when you're older, all this stuff gets more complicated and difficult. But also to keep an open mind for a multidisciplinary approach, because as we have heard yesterday and today, AI is also about humans. So keep an open mind about social studies and things like that. And also don't forget social skills, because hopefully AI will not be leading us in the short-term future. Humans will be leading us, other humans. So social skills are still important.
Mm-hmm. So what we know from studies is that Gen Zs and Alphas are actually very values-based. So the younger generations want to be working for something good and something that meets their value base. And in that environment, my suggestion would be to broaden your focus onto what all other skills and places and work environments can you utilize toward that goal, and not just focusing on this one thing that you want to do. At the same time, this is an information environment that's very rich in all kinds of sources and nuances. And in that sense, I would say you need to build in psychological flexibility. This is something similar to the CISO thing that I was talking about. So something that kind of enables you to roll with bad times and good times, because this is what we're finding also in research about the younger generations. They are lacking this kind of stamina, partly because of us helicoptering parents who've helped them through everything, and partly because of the environment where there is no longer a need to develop this kind of a long-term focus on something, but you can solve things much quicker. So psychological flexibility, and maybe also some cognitive security, in the sense that how do you equip yourself against influence attempts in your thinking? This could also be on the curriculum for many of the universities. This is something we're focusing on in Finland, especially now. So we know that influence attempts are going to happen. We know that they're going to be better than ever. How do we equip our individuals to deal with it? How do we equip them to understand this is now an attempt to appeal to my emotions with this video that looks like my son asking for help? He's been kidnapped, but I know that he hasn't been kidnapped because I just talked to him 2 minutes ago. How do I deal with this fake message? How do I make it sure that whatever skills I have, I can kind of utilize them, draw on my abilities, and use the support that's out there? So kind of this softer landing here.
Thank you. Did you want to add? Yes.
Yeah, can I, because you talked about the young generation, and yeah, I came to think about something else. A recommendation for me would be to get a job in a healthy organization where you can keep on developing yourself and keep on educating yourself for the rest of your life. And I say this because what I see in the security organizations is that when you start using AI and data science, some organizations create a special unit for that and accept that young people would like to work in a different way. They want to learn things and they want to be in such an environment. And other security organizations think that things are so secure, so you hire one person to solve the particular task for that unit. And that person will not stay for long, or that person will stop to develop. So that's what we typically see. And I also, it's super duper important that you should be in this next generation organization where the data science unit has some money and good GPU computers, and you come to work every day and you keep developing your AI skills. You should not be that single person that solves just this particular unit's problem, because then you will, after 5 years, have a problem. For the young generation, keep on asking. You should ask for a good environment without too much hierarchy and so on.
Thank you. Great advice. So now we're turning to some audience questions. I'm going to pair just a couple of questions, and you can address one or both, whichever you'd like. How do small states' perspectives shift when they are economically dependent or otherwise exploited by bordering or global powers? What role does ethics play in decision-making from a small state perspective in comparison to the US when it comes to defense applications?
I can get us started.
Reggie, get us
Yeah,
started.
sure. So yes, situational vulnerability and situational changes, analyzing what's going on, it's really central. I guess I have a great example, which is the war in Ukraine at the moment, because what happened, of course, was that Finland had major business deals with Russia. And some of the Finnish corporations still do, but that was like one of our biggest industry partners. And how do we deal with it? It's a matter of balancing your own democratic and ethical views with those of the business life that's out there. In Finland, the public opinion was very much against continuing anything in Russia. So we've had major corporations having to pull out with really big losses. Of course, the Russians continued with those organizations and confiscated their belongings and continued those businesses in their own ways. So they were major losses. But the point was that the support in the homeland, so in Finland, the support for this kind of business was so strongly opposed that you couldn't continue, even though if it would have been very prosperous in that sense. So yes, we're dependent and losses happen, but I guess at the moment it seems like we are prioritizing ethics in the sense that if our Finnish employees, if our Finnish customers don't want us to continue collaboration in Russia, then we pull out, even though it might be a financial suicide to some companies.
Yeah, okay, well, I agree to a lot that that Vilma mentioned here, and from my perspective, being a Swedish citizen in Sweden, I find that we've come to deal with some of those we have not been so much dependent on, for instance, Russia, but the dependence that we've had has been under the scrutiny, and we have altered the course to become truly independent from them, to ensure that we don't have any kind of economic or otherwise influence, and we know that we are affected of them. We know that they would like for us to become like pushing for digital authoritarianism, if you will, by trying to do subversion and so on. But I think what we see as of now, and so that's answering the how we deal with it. I mean, we are more or less soon independent from it. It's been a large discussion, strategic discussion. When it comes to ethics, I would go back to what I mentioned previously. We are quite pragmatic, and as Vilma mentioned in her opening remarks, kind of remarkable how we can just switch, the light bulb from being, a bit blurry and open-minded to just focusing. We just had a month ago a conference, a summit, where the Supreme Commander stated, prepare to war, or prepare for war. And, well, it took 24 hours, I think, and it was huge reactions. And the day after, the government restated it, along with the other agencies restating it. And, I mean, they did it for reasons of becoming more resilient in society, and it had the effect. I mean, people were just changing their mindset. Perhaps not over the night, but within a few days, the discussion was over, and everyone is now more or less talking about we need to be prepared for war. And that is all due to the situation in Ukraine, which is so close to us. And we know that the neighboring country, as you have mentioned, is Russia, and it's Russia that's the aggressor. So it's kind of pragmatic view on it, but that leading to the ethics, I think that we will be pragmatic there as well, like you have mentioned. We foresee that would not be a conflict, that would not be a war, that would be an existential war, which means that we would then contextualize our ethics and be pragmatic.
Thank you. Anyone else want to handle one of these two questions? No? Oh, we'll move to the next. Okay. Next question is AI will turbocharge hostile information operations, and you all have suggested that you are definitely on the front lines of Russian information operations, but I'm sure that Russia's allies like China and others are involved as well. So how do your smaller, less resourced states handle AI powered information operations? And second question is, what are the risks and opportunities for small states to use AI to protect their soft power? One or both, please.
Yeah, so the thing, how are we protecting? Of course, one answer would be that we need to develop our organizations and look into that and have good computer programs and people looking at that. But one thing I come to think of is that you need to be critical, and that we have, for example, in school, that everyone is learning about critical thinking. So my kids that are attending school at various levels, they learn about critical thinking in school, and they give me a hard time. So when they come home, they question exactly everything I tell them, and Yeah, it's but I think that's a good thing that we have. I didn't notice, I didn't see it coming, but really, if they have educations on that and are looking at social media and what you see there, and have examples in school, so it's on the schedule there. That's a good thing to have in society. Next generation will be much more critically thinking, I think. Stop there.
From Finnish perspective, and I very much agree with Joel. What we have and what we are trying to provide is good education from the elementary school up to educate our citizens and people about the dangers of information influencing and information operations. Critical thinking is essential, and that's also being taught from the elementary school up in Finland. And then, critical thinking is, of course, connected to media literacy. That is a hot topic currently in Finland. Ilma will add on that, I think. And perhaps one way of countering AI influence operations is also the equal opportunities provided to people to get access to information, to education. So good internet connectivity and things like that are essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, did you know that higher education is free in Finland? So you can send your kids to college for free. Also open for Americans, not that I'm shopping, but... So if we're looking at disinformation and misinformation, the newest findings on it, what resonates with people? I think we're shooting at them with wrong weapons, because we have this mentality that if somebody is misinformed, they lack information, and we just teach them to understand it better and provide the right information. And we see this in organizations kind of trying to correct information or put it out there. But actually the newest research suggests that disinformation resonates with people who are left out of societies in some form, or feeling isolated, or that they have some form of stress, whether it's financial or environmental or physical, but some kind of a stress level that's out there. And the newest tool actually, and this is a very soft approach from me, but here it goes, is actually empathy. In the sense that when you see a neighbor or a friend descend down in the spiral of some conspiracy theory, they will not come out of it if you provide them with information of how wrong they are. In fact, they will just spiral further because they understand that you're there out to get them and you're part of them and they've already brainwashed you. The only way to do this, to get to them, is to provide the same kind of safety and security that this online environment that is feeding them this information provides. Acceptance, belonging, looking forward to understanding why they're feeling how they're feeling. And this is something we're not very good at. Anybody in the world. Everybody is really good at educating and correcting with information, but very few of us are really good at actually listening to people, what they want, looking at their emotional needs, and especially in isolated communities within our countries. It happens in all parts of the world where people are feeling isolated and left out or rejected. And this can be just emotional. It doesn't have to be physiological always. How do we reach them to make sure that they feel that they can trust and engage with us before we spam them with information?
Yeah. Okay. So to complement what my colleagues mentioned here, information at war and trust. I mean, in Sweden we have re-established or reactivated, if you will, the Department of Psychological Defense. But to traverse from Vilma here, that is probably for my generation and above. They would perceive that Department of Psychological Affairs or Psychological Defense as, the most most trustworthy there is, whom will mitigate for anything that is misinformation or disinformation. But for the younger generation, I think we still have a challenge to reach them, and the best there is at the moment is probably what Joel started off mentioning, having them being critical even to you as a father. Accepting that there are more than one truth out there, be it or not.
Yeah, just a short comment. It's really great talking to colleagues here, actually. So I'm really enjoying what you guys are saying. I think the question is always, who is an influencer to the person I'm trying to reach? And yes, it's true that traditional organizations or ministries or defense units are actually something of an authority for most older generations. For younger generations, it's increasingly social media influencers. And this is what the government in Finland is doing. When we had the COVID wave hit Finland, we actually had the government work with the most popular social media influencers and YouTubers and had them talk to the authorities, because if those people were listening to the authorities, then it kind of meant that this is legit information, a word that we in Finland, our teenagers like to use. So if you want to sound really cool and hop in Finland, just say legit. Yeah, except we pronounce it legit in Finland, which, roll with that. So the new media influencers are actually the way to actually reach the newer publics. The challenge there is, of course, that they are not in the process or in the business of providing safety information. They are in the business of making money. And partnering with brands and organizations is all good, but the minute you are actually brokering your social capital, so all these relations that you build just to get a message of the government across, you need to have developed a very good relationship with the government. And I guess this all comes down to, are we providing good experiences for all citizens? Because that's the best thing we can do as governments, provide and ensure that everybody has a good experience, that they can actually trust us to take care of things.
Yeah, so I build on further on that. And who is an influencer? And for me, the influencer, for me personally, it is Swedish news. So I watch the news all nights at 9 p.m. or something. And perhaps then I'm biased, because Swedish news is probably biased in some way. I don't know. But and for other people, the influencer is someone else. So it comes down to AI again, and the systems we are developing, and the recommendation to intelligence authorities is, of course, to work with data-driven open source methods to provide a statistical account, not just looking, you shouldn't go to work starting with some seeds and look at certain accounts or certain persons or certain. So you need to look at the whole feed, the whole internet feed of information to have a statistical measure of what is said.
Just an add-on on that one. I think we experienced during the COVID and the pandemic that like a teaser or taste of this information at war, because there was a lot of misinformation during that time, and in Sweden we realized that we are not really up to it from the government side. We need to make sure that the government is available to answer questions, because they were just loaded with questions, people calling in or emailing or something. I think we've learned from that and try to boost, also using automation actually, to have some frequently asked questions, but rapidly developed to be able to serve the public and the society with information, so that they are provided information based on what they need. And that could be a mitigation of this as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. One point. because information, I'm perhaps not giving solutions, but more problems, because information operations require information. We have to think about how we protect our information, how we deny the opponent the monitoring of our national media space or social media space, or deny the gathering of information to launch different kinds of plan and launch different kinds of information operations. And that's something, I don't know, can we really do that? Can we deny the information? So if we could do that, I think we would be doing that already. So the thing that we have to do is to monitor the information space ourselves. And that's perhaps easier for small countries like us. It doesn't take so much resources. There's not so many platforms. The media space is smaller. So we have the capability to use AI to monitor our own media space, to detect social media space, to detect these kind of malign information operations faster and try to react to them. And we also had in Finland, I think also in Sweden, public broadcast companies. So that the government is able to put its message out there through broadcasting companies and media resources that are government controlled. So we are not relying solely on private companies and private media companies. So we have the tools to hit back if we recognize these kind of operations.
Thank you. So I just want to say quickly that after lunch at 1:45, 3 of our guests, except for Vilma, because she has a prior commitment, will take part in a breakout session on Russian threats and AI. So I do have more questions related to Russia, but we'll save that for the breakout session. I have a question here about NATO, and I think this is important, and it also it conveys the view, which is very common, that it's, there's quite a negative view about NATO. And here we have representatives from 2 new NATO countries. So the question is, how are you showing empathy if you have joined NATO, the implicit assumption being that NATO is a negative organization? So I guess, what is your take on this? And did your views change? You know, Vilma, you said that the views changed overnight, and I assume it changed in February of 2022. So how would you answer this question? And I'd love the views of others as well.
So first of all, to us, NATO is a savior at the moment. So we're in the honeymoon stage. To us, it looks everything that we always wanted. We haven't hit the reality stage yet, but I predict that's going to happen in 1 to 2 years, and especially if things calm down with the war. So I think we should be taking advantage of the honeymoon stage, because there are things that you can move forward and develop and inspire and make happen in that stage.
The bottom line, I think, is that Finland has been trying to manage its relationship with Soviet Union and then Russia from 1918 forwards. And in February 2022, we saw that that management policy has ended. So we really didn't have any choice at that point. If we were looking in the future and our relationship with Russia, we saw that the management road is over, and now we have to try something else. And NATO is that we are trying something else. And we are, of course, signaling to Russia that we made this decision because what they did, and they had to think again what they are doing and what kind of world they want to have and what kind of powers or nations they want to have as their neighbors in the future. That's what we can do as a small state.
Yeah, I was almost returning the question, ask us in a few years' time, but I would agree what Vilma and Juhas mentioned, because we were also independent and neutral at once. And prior to that, we have a history of just war fighting with Russia and Denmark. But now we are very much in line with what you have just mentioned. This is our reaction to the reality that is shown by Russia, and it's like your turn. And that's why we think that being a NATO member is kind of a good thing.
No, nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Okay. All right. Well, I think that we have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.
Golfo, thank you very much. And also, I would like to extend an appreciation to our panelists for traveling all the way here from their beautiful countries to be with us in Tampa. But I don't think you minded too much coming here in February in Tampa from there, yes?
We love it.
You love it. Okay, so thank you so much. So we'll break now for lunch, but before we do, I have some instructions. So please, I'm just going to read this. We'll break now for lunch until 1:45. When you return from lunch, please go straight to the breakout session of your choice. You can see the schedule on the video screens as well as in your program. Session 2 will be a repeat of Session 1 in order to make it easier for you to attend 2 of the 4 available breakouts. With the exception of the Europe-Russian AI-enabled security threats breakout session, this will only be offered from 1:45 to 2:45. So again, after lunch, please go straight to your breakout rooms. Following the first session, there will be a short break, and the second break session will start at 2:45. We'll return to this main room for the second session for a summary of all 4 breakout sessions, reconvening here at 4:10. Also, an important reminder to our online and virtual audience, which we thank and appreciate them joining us throughout. Our live stream of today's event is now ending. The afternoon's breakout session will not be live streamed. We look forward to you again, this is for virtual, to rejoining us again tomorrow at 9 a.m. for day 3. So again, please enjoy your lunch. We have a lot of offerings downstairs and nearby, and we'll see you in the breakout sessions in here at 4:10. Thank you.